What's the dumbest thing you see every day, and is it funny or just plain sad? I'm a physician. I doctor specifically. I'll tell you that the longer I work, it's now 15 years, my standard for the average person continues to decline. Case in point, thanks to the awful information filtering out there, I had a patient just last week who read that vitamin D helps you resist a coronavirus infection. Well, it also read that you can get more vitamin D by getting more sun. So he wanted to collect as much light as possible with his eyes. As a result, he stared at the sun for a solid 60 seconds and burned holes directly into his retinas, permanently reducing his vision with no chance at future improvement. One grown adult I met said that English is the true language of God because apparently the Bible is written in English. The amount of people who think Jesus lived in the United States is astonishing. I used to work in travel, and the amount of people who didn't understand the following points was staggering. You can't take a 3 to 7 round-trip night cruise from Miami to Australia. And no, your friend didn't just do this. No, there are in fact no ocean-bound cruises leaving from Arizona. You can't take a cruise from Miami to Hawaii and be back in 7 to 10 days. No, the airport is closed due to hurricanes, flood, or ice, and you can't demand a flight on a different carrier out of the same airport in the next hour. Also, no, you didn't just see someone else book that. Yes, it is a shorter flight for your friends from the East Coast US to the Caribbean than you in Europe, and no, nobody can change that. Yes, I'll need to see your DD-214 to confirm a military rate. No, your word that you were in a covert unit will not suffice. And no, I'm not disrespecting the military because I simply can't take your word for it. Yes, if a passport or visa or travel vaccination is needed for you to travel, you will need it, and no, a manager can't override this as it's a government requirement. I've been doing this for 6 years, and no, your friend's neighbor's hairdresser's roommate's cousin's mailman doesn't know more about this than I do. Oof. So, my favorite was a guy who was planning his honeymoon, but he didn't have a lot of money. He was bummed about the cost of air travel. A friend suggested a train ride might be cheaper. He became frustrated after a few days of trying and complained that he couldn't find any trains going to, wait for it, Hawaii. It still didn't sink in because he'd seen pictures of trains in Hawaii. He just couldn't grasp that they were shipped there. It got even more surreal after that. He argued with us that no boat was big enough to carry a train. We told him how big container ships were, and he was honestly befuddled. I mean, this is clearly a time traveler or something. He was keeping the illusion together pretty well up until that moment, but you blew his mind just a little bit too much. Honestly, I'm a modern man, I promise, and the size of industrial vehicles still blows my mind sometimes. Have you seen bucket excavators like the Bagger 288? That's some goddamn Warhammer 40k crap. I can see why people would believe in machine gods when you see something like that. A girl in one of my college classes argued that heart transplants shouldn't be allowed because that's where the feelings are, and the person receiving the heart wouldn't be the same person anymore. I do aquatic habitat restoration in a spring-fed river that people frequently tube or float on. Myself and numerous others have been asked if it comes back around so they can get out. A friend of mine showered in cold water for a year because he never thought of turning the other tap to see what it would do. I have pressed every single button, turned every tap, flicked every switch in my house at least 1,000,000 times, including the fuses. How can people just stand in a shower and never try anything, especially if they don't have hot water? It just blows my mind. I used to work for a chatbot app. Our app would text our users every morning with a greeting in a different language, like hola, bonjour, you get the picture. One day, we got blown up by a user saying their account was getting hacked. She said, "My name is Kim Smith, not Kim Konnichiwa. Someone's hacked my account." When we explained that our service had been clearly saying hello to her in other languages every day and that Konnichiwa is hello in Japanese and her account was fine, she went on a racist rant and said Disney was behind the destruction of America. Yep. My old boss had a morning routine of walking around the office with a bucket. He was watering all of the plastic flowers. Okay, I've been unfortunately guilty of this one time. A new girl started at work and she sat across from me, so we shared some desk space in the corner. She put all of these flowers there with a special vase that made it look like real water in the bottom. As a nice gesture, I watered them for her before one weekend. She got a huge kick out of it and we laughed about it all the time. I just had a customer yell at me for putting their eggs in a separate bag, saying they don't want all of these bags and the paper ones always rip, before putting it in the bag and throwing a pound of flour on top of the eggs. It was somewhat satisfying seeing their face as we heard the cracks, until I realized I'm the one who needed to clean it up. Oh, and she complained that we hadn't warned her about the fragility of eggs. At the DMV, I went to renew my license. I was waiting in a room with the computers that people use to take the written portion. The clerk sat a man down, looked him in the eyes and said, "If you pull your phone out, it's an automatic fail." The window licker says, "Alright," while pulling out his phone and immediately failing. I saw a guy in front of me at the DMV fail the eye test and tell all the employees he has glasses but they're at home. He got really mad when the employee told him he has to come back with the glasses and retake it. Hank Johnson, the Georgia senator that wanted to prevent sending troops to an island because he was worried it would capsize. About half the calls I take on a daily basis. People call 911 to ask whether Walmart is open, or to report that they didn't get enough mayo on their burger, to complain that a cleanup at a fatality wreck is taking too long. All sorts of silly, out-of-touch crap. Granted, there's probably some level of mental illness or substance use present in those calls, but still. "I found a sandwich in one of your parks and I want to know why it didn't have mayonnaise on it." Getting a misdialed call from a random person who gets angry at you because you're not the one he or she was looking for. Happens with me several times a year. I once owned a smart car and some stranger approached me at a gas station about why I didn't have a slow vehicle sign on the back of it, since all moped cars must have that. I tried explaining that it was a real car, just a bit smaller, but he didn't take it. According to him, I was driving illegally and he was surprised the police hadn't stopped me yet on the highway. My family has 2 electric cars and the sheer number of people who ask, "Yeah, but where do you put the gas?" after explaining that it runs on batteries is just staggering. I think it's because they're still thinking hybrid car rather than all-electric car. But even after a very thorough explanation, they often still go back to, "Where does the gas go?" My dad is a pesticide investigator for the state and heard this on a complaint. "I set out all these bird feeders and bird baths, but not one bird comes to my yard. I bet it's all those pesticides that crop dusters are laying down in the field." This was said by a local school board member as they were standing in her 5-acre yard with 20 or more cats running around. At the start of working from home due to COVID, I had a few users submit tickets for connectivity issues. These tickets go through 2 lines of support before landing in my queue. Turns out that the corporate Wi-Fi doesn't follow you home, and you need home internet in order to connect to the VPN. I recently spent 20 minutes on the phone with a board member trying to diagnose why his camera wasn't working for our online meetings. Funny thing is, you have to actually have a camera in order for it to work. I used to manage a retail store that sold teen clothing, so as expected, I primarily had teens working for me. One employee came to the back room while I was on break and asked what I was eating. Somehow the topic turned to how I should have brought chicken for lunch because she wanted chicken. I told her I was vegetarian and therefore don't eat meat. She tells me chicken is not meat, it's poultry, and vegetarians can eat poultry. She then said that the grocery store aisle lists meat and poultry separately, so they're obviously different. We argued for a couple of minutes before I finally told her to go back to the sales floor. She didn't last at the job long, but damn. Customers arguing that their tattoo is backwards while their artist tries to explain that no, your tattoo is fine. It just looks backwards because that's how mirrors work. Look, as a man whose IQ halves depending on how tired he is, I could see me doing this after 4 hours in a chair with no coffee, maybe having a bit of a snooze in the middle. You forget these little facts of life temporarily sometimes. I think whether they're stupid or just having a dumb moment hangs on whether they get angry or think you're trying to trick them. You see, smart people don't often get angry when they realize they're wrong or learn something new. You know the reason you bury a rattlesnake after you kill it is because bees will eat it and then the bees can sting people with rattlesnake venom? That was from a guy I heard constantly trying to pick up women on public transport. He probably also thought that a bear ate the honey and got snake fangs and stingers on its claws. The circle of life is both gorgeous and terrifying. I worked in retail for a few years and it taught me that many people are either incapable or unwilling to read. I've had people walk up to me to ask how much something is, only for the price tag to be featured prominently on the item. It's $9.99, ma'am. How did you know? It says so on the price tag, ma'am. I worked with a lady who was remarking on how a friend of hers had lost a bunch of weight. She pondered, I wonder how many Diet Cokes she had to drink to do that. Then again, the same lady was convinced beyond repair that when you sneeze, the air only comes out of your nose. There was no convincing her otherwise. I teach 6th grade. One time a parent came to me after trying to help their child with math homework and asked, "What number is X worth? It feels like it changes with every problem." There's a considerable overlap between the intelligence of the smartest bears and the dumbest tourists, said a Yosemite Park ranger on why it's hard to design a bear-proof garbage can. I worked at a bank. Mobile depositing had just become a thing. We received pictures of someone's cash for deposit. Yeah. See, bro, just wait like 2 hours and take another photo of the same cash and deposit it again. And again, and again. Whoa, instant money! Yeah, bro, instant money. Frick, we're gonna be so rich off this $84. This woman I used to work with who insisted that any animal could reproduce with any other animal. She believed that seed from any animal was the same and that DNA was irrelevant. She believed this because she once saw some sickly, possibly deformed puppies and decided they must have been half dog and half rat. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A former co-worker was talking about how she wanted to go back to school to get her master's degree because she only had a bachelorette degree and wanted more job opportunities. I said, "Do you mean a bachelor's degree?" She insisted it was pronounced bachelorette when it was given to a woman. She then led me back to her office, pointed at her diploma to the word baccalaureate, and said, "See? Bachelorette." I had a co-worker, really sweet girl but dumb as all heck. She told me she smoked American spirits because they were non-addictive, see? As she showed me the box. Oh honey, no, that says no additives. Such a sweet, stupid girl. She was a great waitress, at least. I had a bald man return a hairdryer because it burnt his head. Every time I put on my glasses so I can see better while looking for my glasses. Was at a party and someone's crappy old truck got stuck in some mud. So instead of sobering up and coming back the next day, he made a Molotov cocktail with gas and threw it at the truck. The truck caught fire and was completely destroyed. Whenever you've got a problem, you throw a Molotov cocktail, and then you've got a completely different problem. When I was in high school, we were reading a short story about what would have happened if the Japanese attacked us back with nuclear weapons after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A girl in my class raised her hand and said something along the lines of, "Why does this matter? None of it's real anyway." The teacher asked her to clarify, but this girl thought World War II and the bombing of Japan were just from a movie and didn't actually happen. The best part is that the girl was half Japanese. Worked at a larger grocery chain whose deli used scales that would show you digitally the weight, so 1.5 pounds would show 1.5 lbs on the scale. This person I worked with, a 35-year-old female, had to ask me over and over to tell her how much she'd sliced every time she assisted someone for over 4 months. She'd passed the written and verbal test they gave to verify that you should be able to do this. She didn't seem to have problems reading any other signs or numbers, so I don't think dyslexia played a part, but man, it was so frustrating trying to do my job and hers. I worked in IT. I once had a lady call me from home because she couldn't get connected to her VPN. I asked her if she was connected to her home wireless network, and she replied saying that she didn't have home wireless. I then asked how she was connecting to the internet, and her reply was, "I'm using the cell tower, I can see it from my house." While this was technically possible with a hotspot or cellular card in your PC, this isn't what she meant. She thought she could get internet service via Wi-Fi from the cell phone tower. The woman that called into a radio station to complain about the deer crossing signs on a highway, saying that the deer will read the sign and consider this a safe place to cross the road. When farms have trouble producing their crops and you ask some idiot if that worries them, "I don't get my food from a farm, I get it from Walmart." The distance that many people have from where their food comes from is shocking. One of my nieces had a cold as a toddler and was breathing through her mouth. My ex-brother-in-law flipped out because he didn't want her to get carbon monoxide poisoning from breathing through her mouth instead of her nose, like the normal way. I'm an insurance claims adjuster. If you truly knew how many stupid drivers you were sharing the road with, you'd never drive again. And let me say that because I keep getting this question when I say this, I avoid driving whenever possible. I have a car, but I take the bus to and from work. I never drive at night. Oh boy, it's like how food safety specialists have an alarmingly long list of very normal foods that they don't touch with a 10-foot barge pole. I think the rest of us are honestly just happier not knowing most of this stuff, right? When my daughter was born, we had to see the hospital pediatrician before we could switch to our usual one. We're in a tiny exam room and he's going over the do's and don'ts for new parents. To precede this, he's an older southern man. And I assume she'll be sleeping in a crib in the nursery? Oh, we have a bassinet set up beside the bed to make night feeding easier. She can't sleep with you. She won't be in the bed, she has a bassinet besides the bed. If she sleeps in the same room, there'll be too much carbon dioxide and she'll suffocate. That's what causes SIDs. Then isn't this exam room unsafe? We put in a complaint with the practice and the hospital. That's some ridiculously incorrect information to be spouting off at people, especially parents who take everything a doctor says as gospel. I can't even find the logic in what was going on there. On September 11th, the general manager called his daughter, who was attending Arizona State University, to wake up and make sure she saw what was going on the TV. The customer service manager said, "Oh, it won't be on her TV yet. Arizona is 2 hours behind us." Why didn't Australia warn us about September 11th? We could have got like a day's advance warning. I work at a restaurant. We were low on tomatoes for our tomato soup, so one person grabbed potatoes to see if we could use those instead. When my mum unironically claimed that the moon landing was fake because the moon was like 40 times the size of Earth. How that proves it was fake, I don't know. I hate to think that she raised me. I worked at Little Caesars and we were proofing the dough for pizza. My boss said at 7 p.m. that the dough needed to rise for 12 hours and took out her calculator to do the math. So I said, that's going to be 7 a.m. She then said the dough will expire in 48 hours and started doing the math again. I told her it would expire 2 days from now and she said, "That's kind of weird how that works out, huh?" I quit shortly after that. The fact the Florida government had to tell people not to shoot at the hurricane. Even better, the fact that NOAA has even had to have a section on their site explaining why using nuclear weapons against hurricanes is far worse than the worst idea you can possibly imagine. You want to be depressed? Just scroll down a webpage or Facebook feed and have a look at the ads. Things like, "Only 2% can solve this puzzle." Crap like that. Those ads get posted so much because they actually work on a lot of people. Ugh, these are the worst. "Only 5% of people are smart enough to get this right. Can you?" And then it's usually some stupid grade school riddle that I've known the answer to since I was 7, or some complicated math equation that any middle schooler who remembers PEMDAS could easily solve. I actually had people on my Facebook who would share their results for these tests like, "Oh my god, look how smart I am, I knew the answer." I mean, sure, there are probably people who wouldn't be able to answer these, but it's definitely not 95%, and if you're dumb enough to actually believe that only 5% of the people who read that post can solve it and feel like knowing the answer somehow gives you bragging rights, you're definitely not winning any intelligence awards. In grade 10, we had a science test, and the teacher gave 1 point for putting a date on the paper and 1 point for your name on the paper. And then there were 98 points for the rest of the test. A guy sitting in front of me got half a point. He didn't write the date and only wrote his first name. In the 80s, A&W attempted to compete with a McDonald's quarter-pounder burger by selling a third-pounder for the same price. The operation failed tremendously, with virtually nobody buying the burger. When they surveyed customers for an explanation, the majority of customers responded that they didn't want to pay the same price for less meat. Their customers genuinely believed that 1/3 was less than 1/4 and refused to try the new A&W burger because of it. I used to work at a burger or Shake Shack type place. Oftentimes people wouldn't read the menu at all and just open with, "I'd like a cheeseburger," and naturally would ask, "A quarter or 1/3 pound?" The variety of people who just said, whichever is bigger, astounded me. Infantryman was told to trim the hedges, so he lifted the lawnmower. His buddy started the lawnmower. As a brand new medic, I spent about 6 hours pulling finger meat out of the hedges. I knew a kid who drank bleach to prove that it wouldn't kill you. A week later, he showed up at school after taking a shot. He said he had proved his point when the teacher asked why he was bragging about it. Mr. Hawk just said, "But you can't argue that without that medical treatment you would have died though. You even said that you had stomach damage and a burnt esophagus yourself." This kid was bragging about that. No, he wasn't mentally disabled or otherwise. He was just stupid. Myself, looking for my phone when it was in my hand the whole time, then answering a call and continuing looking for it during the call. I once got into an argument with someone over my own name. There are 2 pronunciations, German and English, and they couldn't accept the fact that I use the English pronunciation despite the fact that we're speaking English and it's what I've used my whole life. But nope, I was lying to mess with them. I've got 2 little girls who were born 15 months apart. They look pretty similar and we get asked if they're twins pretty often. Even though one's a bit taller, you'd be forgiven for thinking they were fraternal twins. But yeah, I once got into an argument with someone over whether my daughters are twins or not. It wasn't until I pointed out that I was literally there watching them be birthed that they finally conceded. The people who believe 5G was responsible for spreading COVID. Seriously, I don't understand how electromagnetic signals could possibly distribute a biologically impactful virus. Seriously, there's a new low every month and every year. The flat earther that tried to launch himself into frickin' space and died. American voters were surveyed as to which they liked better, Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. The ACA had drastically higher support, and they are the same frickin' thing. To be fair, if I received a survey asking me to compare the two, I'd assume that the people writing the survey knew what they were doing and that they were different, even if I'd previously believed they were the same. One of my closest friends. Really good guy, but, well, I'm learning Spanish and I once told him I was reading his Don Quixote book. I complained about how difficult it was because it was written in 1605, and he said, "Wait, Spanish existed back then?"
Middle school teachers, what is the cringiest thing you've seen a student do? Director of Technology here. I don't really have much to do with the kids at the school I work at, but I definitely have a cringy moment. Called down to the middle school from my office to debug a problem for a teacher. The classrooms in this building all have 2 doors. One door opens into the building hallways, the other opens to the outside. My office is across a field from the middle school, so I decide to just cut across the field and enter the side door to the classroom instead of going all the way around the field and entering the classroom from the hallway. Bear in mind that these outside doors are almost never used by anyone except for an occasional fire drill. I open the door and step in to see a room full of students facing away from me and towards their teacher. The student closest to me scrambles to click X on her browser, but not before I see full-on, hardcore yaoi hentai. Did I mention I work at a Christian private school? She turns bright red, and with visibly trembling hands, she closes her laptop lid. I burst out laughing, which interrupted the class. The teacher looks to me in questioning confusion, and the students stare in silence. I casually walked over her and said, loudly enough for the classroom to hear, "Let's not look at memes and Facebook jokes at school, guys." Her flush-red face, contorted with fear, suddenly relaxed. Her trembling hands stilled. I laughed again and went and debugged the wireless access point issue I was called down for. No point getting her expelled over hormonal changes and curiosity. Valentine's Day, and a boy brings a girl a dozen roses. They were both in my homeroom, so I watched this all go down right in front of me. I had literally never seen these two have a conversation before either. Girl didn't know what to do with roses at 7 a.m., so she threw the roses in the trash can literally 20 seconds after it happened and went on her merry way. The boy never found out. We had this one kid in our 8th grade class stick his entire hand in a cake that was being passed around for a party, grab a chunk, and started eating it like a Neanderthal. It was chocolate and his face was covered. When he finished his chunk of cake with everyone looking in disgust, he then proceeded to lick every finger. It was torture watching. He also ended up being the kid that threatened to blow up the school at the end of the year. Oh my god. I had a kid carve his own name in his desk, but he couldn't figure out how we caught him. Strange, isn't it? Around the 8th grade dance season, they call it prom, there was a whole lot of cringiness roaming the halls. One popular tactic among the boys was explained to me. We ask the girl to prom, and then we run away so she can't say no. I caught the student on Google search attempting to look me up. He spelled my name wrong, and my name is very common, so I wasn't worried. I sent him home since it was an after-school homework club, and then went through the rest of the history, which included boobs, naked women, Megan Fox nudes, and Megan Fox panties. One of the other students in the class kinda picked up on what was happening and mentioned that he has also been kicked out of the public library for similar reasons. A more innocent story, I was fixing the little girl next door's laptop. She shouldn't have a laptop, and her grandmother doesn't monitor anything she does because she doesn't know computers. I decided to peek in her computer history since she was 7 or 8 at the time. I was curious what kids her age did on the computer. Most of it was super spammy sites, but then I found a collection of how to prank call and what is Miley Cyrus's phone number? I was amused. There was always this kid that would go up to guys, shake their hands, and deeply sniff their necks. One day a teacher asked why he did this to guys, and all he said was, "If I did it to girls, it'd be weird." I once offered a boy a My Little Pony color by number sheet. Ran out of Super Mario. The boy's response, "Mister, I'm not gay. I'm a lesbian. I like girls." I mean, to his credit, he's not wrong, but he is incorrect. I was demonstrating convection, which included burning some newspaper. One kid piped up with, that smells like incest." He meant incense. They were too young to get it, but I nearly died trying not to laugh. My husband teaches English at a middle school. He brought some creative writing assignments home to grade, and since I'm an assistant teacher for much younger humans, kindergarten, he drafted me into helping him sort through the mess and grade them. We've made good progress through the stack when I pick up a paper that had a kiss mark near the name in lipstick. Okay, that's odd, but I'm used to working with kids who are only just figuring out bathroom habits. A little lipstick on a report is hardly weird in my book, plus middle school. Then I see the name. Hun? Who is R? Husband without missing a beat. R is this goth kid who looks like a rainbow threw up on him after having marathon screwing with a unicorn. I look back at the kiss mark. Glitter lipstick. Nice shade choice if the kid is going for goth pale. I read his creative writing assignment. I get up halfway through to go pour myself some more wine. It's an extremely well-written gay story featuring my husband and another teacher at the school. This kid is going places. I don't know what those places are, but he's going places. I had a student who would constantly butt into people's conversations, and when they asked him to mind his own business, he'd stand up and proclaim, "Nobody likes me! Everyone thinks I'm so annoying! Ha ha!" And he'd laugh while everyone awkwardly stared at him. Another kid literally told me one time that he would just act annoying so that he could impress a certain group of boys. They were not impressed. Well, at least that first kid is honest with himself. I had a 6th grader lick a book. He definitely tried to keep it on the DL, so he looked around, made sure no one was looking in his direction, and then licked the book. It was a tongue poke, then a full-out lick up the spine of the book. I had a classmate who had to give a presentation using PowerPoint. So there's a computer hooked up to a projector that is pointed at the screen that fills the wall. This guy sticks his USB with his presentation in the computer and it automatically loads the images he had on it in a gallery. He had a folder full of pictures of girls from his class he had downloaded from Facebook. That was kinda awkward. My mom is a middle school English teacher. Once, a student snuck a bar of soap into her class, ate it, and proceeded to run out of the classroom and start vomiting. Apparently, he did it to impress his friends. One of the kids responded to questions like Pikachu. Shame that a good kid is going to look back on those days with absolute horror. Not a student in particular, but a whole bunch of them. I was a substitute teacher for a few years on my university breaks, but last January was the worst middle school day I've ever had. 8th grade science class. I asked the kids to open their textbooks and work on the assignment. A girl shyly raises her hand and says, "Miss, there's something inappropriate in my book." Of course, some kid drew a member. I calmly tell her to erase it and move on. 3 more kids say the same thing. I say, "If you have something inappropriate in your book, please just erase it." Every kid starts whining about how there's members in their books. Since they won't shut up about it, I take the offending books and replace them with different books from the back of the room. Every single book had a huge member drawn in it. All 90-something of them. Crudely drawn members, artistic members, Squidward screwing SpongeBob, you name it, it was there. The kids rioted, I almost quit. I taught 4th grade last year, and I had a student who was 12 years old, middle school age, held back a few years. She always did very odd things to try to impress her classmates, but they were relatively tame. Until there was a line in the bathroom and she took her pants off, squatted over the trash can and peed. 4 or 5 girls came running out of the bathroom and told on her. I once confiscated what I first thought was a note being passed in class, but turned out to be a gay fanfic one of my students wrote, pairing 2 of her classmates. Had an 8th grade girl pretend to pass out because she was upset. She got written up for screaming that another girl was a freaking jerk in the middle of a science lesson. Then got upset when that other girl didn't also get in trouble for looking at her wrong. In the dean's office, she was so quote-unquote upset that she pretended to faint, complete with back of the palm to the forehead and dramatic exhale, and then laid on the floor until we were forced to call an ambulance. Before the ambulance came, Mom walked in, she worked right across the street, and said, "Dang it, Jennifer, we're not doing this again." So evidently this was a regular happening around their house. At this point, the girl squinted her eyes open but refused to actually get up. When the squad got there, they checked her vitals and basically knew she was fine. They had to take her because we can't take chances with this stuff in schools. We all just kind of looked at each other and shrugged. So yeah, that was cringy. I will relay a short story that my 7th grade bio teacher told us. In that class, we dissected a cow eyeball. The year before us, a student pocketed the lens of the eye. Looks like a yellowish hard thing about the size of a peanut M&M. In his next class, he stood up and swallowed it in front of everyone. Another teacher told me about a student he had who would come to school in different costumes, ninja, soldier, etc., and stay in character the whole day. I do not remember the details, but there was an incident in which he threw throwing stars during a talent show. In 6th grade science class, our teacher asked if anyone knew what the arms of an octopus were called, and this kid immediately raised his hand and blurted out, "Testicles!" Everyone was laughing, including the teacher, who also snorted. His face was so red. Kid wore clothes to school with the price tag sticking out. When asked why, I was informed that this was to let everyone know he was wearing new clothes. I thought this was going to end with the kid having stolen them, I work for a private school. At this point, that's really all you have to say. This middle schooler recently started dating another one. The girl decided to come to school in a black leather miniskirt and black leather tank top combo. At recess, which I watched because it's a small school, she was dancing all around in front of her boyfriend and hanging off the fence a la stripper. It was hilarious and so cringy. One student wanted to ask me if I had a doppelganger. What he actually said was, "Do you have a dingleberry?" I also had a girl ask me what food stamps were, which isn't surprising because the district is very affluent. I explained, but she still seemed confused, so she asked what it means to, quote, blow a trucker for food stamps. Evidently, she was reading a book meant for a more mature audience, and her worldly knowledge hadn't caught up to her reading level yet. I organized an activity that was sort of like Never Have I Ever, but positive and meant to build empathy. Basically, a student would say, "You're in my boat if," and whatever they say that is the same as you have to stand up and find another chair. Great activity. One of the girls, who I often found puzzling because she just did and said things that were nonsensical, started her period and got blood all over multiple chairs. Some kids start looking at the seats and have no idea what's going on. The girls in the class figure it out but don't say anything. They just avoid said tainted chairs. The boys, however, are as dumb as a box of rocks and are touching it and sitting in the seats. I'm sitting there horrified since 1, that's disgusting, 2, I didn't initially know who was pulling a carry, and 3, how the heck do I nonchalantly stop the activity to get this biohazard cleaned up and no one really notices? After a short observation of the students, I noticed that the one girl was the unfortunate cause of all this. I told her that she was to do a favor for me, and I stepped outside. I asked her if she knew that she started her period, and she said yes. I sent her to the office and then went back in the room for damage control. I honestly don't know how I concocted a magical excuse, but I told all the kids that we were invited to go to the library for silent reading time, but had to go now because all the good squishy seats would be taken if they didn't hustle. They believed me and I sent them down there. A few girls stayed behind that figured out what happened, and I told them I knew and sent them as well. I finally got on the phone and informed the unfortunate janitor about the bloodbath in my room. This student spent an entire semester speaking in a Russian accent for an experiment. No one questioned him. First day back from winter break, he is back to talking normal. We were all incredibly confused, and his parents ended up going to the superintendent about our school allowing bullying. I teach history and let my students do a PowerPoint presentation on the history of anything. Some kid did the history of furries. He came to class wearing his fursuit. Honestly, kids got guts. I respect him for that. I teach 8th grade. The student had talked to me previously in private about how the girl he liked was in my class the same period he was. He said that they had almost dated when they were both at their previous school before transferring to the one where I teach. On top of that, all the other students were aware that he had a major crush on this girl. So one day, he finished his classwork early and apparently he just couldn't take the hormones raging inside of him anymore. He blurts out, loud enough for everyone in class to hear, "Look, girl's name, are you gonna date me or what?" I pretend to work through this while cringing so hard on the inside. I see every other student in the room work through this, from shock to laughter to pure amazement and curiosity as to both why he would choose this moment and what on earth her response would be. The girl very politely said, "I'm just not looking for a relationship right now. Thanks for asking, though." Had a kid who legitimately believed he was a Sith, like from Star Wars. His helicopter mom would come flying down to the school crying religious discrimination if you told him otherwise. He would relax his throat and talk in a deep voice and say it was his real voice, but he disguised his voice to not scare his human brethren. On free dress days, he'd wear an all-denim outfit with high waters and denim vest over a denim shirt. I had him for science, so he blurted out things about alchemy from an anime he was into whenever we were working with the periodic table. He also had a girlfriend who lived in Mexico who was also his cousin. Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain, something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. Not a teacher, but in 7th grade biology we dissected rats, and the teacher warned that they might be juicy from preservatives. So I grabbed my dead rat, turned it over in the air, and shouted, "You gotta squeeze the pudding out of it!" My lab mate fainted as brown juices poured onto the table. I am now an adult biologist who does not do quite the same stuff. Scratch their butt with a ruler inside their pants and then put the ruler back into the container of rulers. Not a teacher, but I interned with one recently. Apart from the kid who insisted on being called Frisk, Undertale I guess, but the craze had died down so it was just weird. There was one girl who wore a cat ear headband. Kinda cute since they were the metal silhouette type that kids wear, but she paired it with a freaking cattail. A big, black and white, furry cattail. Not a teacher, but when I was in school, those track pants with snaps down the side were popular. The boys would try to yank the pants off each other during class changes, and they all wore basketball shorts underneath. One day, some guy thought it would be funny to rip off a girl's track pants. However, she didn't have shorts on. Bright purple undies on show, and the look of terror on that boy's face was hilarious. She just ran off, and a friend followed with her pants. Just finished my first year of teaching middle school. I had one particular student who did not view me as an authority and refused to work in my class. This was especially concerning because this student was placed in an advanced class and chose not to learn purely because of who the teacher was. This also meant that the student's classmates were well-behaved, gifted students. One day, while the whole class was completing an assignment, this student was not working. When I addressed the issue, the student threw a fit and started crawling around on the floor underneath the other students' desks. Now, I don't know when you've last been in a middle school classroom, but the floor is absolutely filthy. This student thoroughly embarrassed themselves, as was evident by the looks received from the other students. The whole situation was extremely awkward for everyone, especially when the student realized that they would get no support from the other students. Kid in a fedora offering high fives in the hallway, but then dabbing just before the other person's hand made contact. It was supposed to be a prank for a vlog. I had a couple of Markiplier fangirls a couple of years ago that just gave me the heebie-jeebies. A group of about 20 kids that run up and down the halls shouting about memes. One of which, when asked what he did over the weekend, started with, "So do you know the insert obscure meme?" While making Earth Day posters, one kid tried to disguise pot leaves as palm trees. There were several I love trees on it. Earth Day was on 4/22, so he also wrote the first 2 with a swirl at the end so that it looked like he'd written 420, but it just looked like 4202. I probably should keep a list, but they happen so often that I don't think I'd ever be able to keep up with it. One of my mother's students took a whole pizza in the box out of her office and just started eating. When told to stop and put it back, he licked the rest of the pizza and asked if he could have it. She said no and told him to throw it away. He started arguing that it was better in his stomach than in the trash. My mom was furious. Not a teacher, but I had a classmate on a field trip rub mud all over his clothes and body so he could go home. Turns out his mom's car broke down and she couldn't pick him up. He had to wear his muddy clothes for the rest of the trip. My friend and I got busted on day 1 of 8th grade social studies passing a crude drawing of a classmate of ours getting pleasured by 2 well-endowed men wearing party hats. I didn't think the teacher looked at it until I got summoned to the office during next period. The principal unfolded the drawing and says to us, "Can you boys explain to me what this is?" I knew I was screwed. My friend reaches over the desk and grabs it, holds it close to his face like he's scrutinizing it, and says to the principal, "It looks like a picture of classmate being pleasured with 2 large men, and I think they're wearing party hats." I freaking lost it. My friend got expelled midway through that year for threatening to kill the principal during math class. What is it with these stories and taking such wild turns? I swear! Why can't middle schoolers just be normal for 5 minutes? Not a teacher, but an illiterate girl was doing a presentation on the country of Nigeria. Yeah, I think you guys can guess how she pronounced it. Not a teacher, sorry to be that person. In middle school, my friends and I were not in the popular crowd, but one of my friends had a huge crush on the most popular boy in school, who was also a major jerk. So one day, she brought him a bouquet of flowers and a heart-shaped box of chocolates. She brought the gift to him before school where he and his crappy friends hung out and asked him to be her boyfriend. I happened to be nearby and witnessed the whole thing. They laughed and laughed at her until she ran away crying. Despite riding the same bus as her, I never saw her again that school year. I saw her that summer since she lived nearby, and she told me she transferred schools because of the incident. Poor girl was brave enough to give it a shot, just to be literally laughed out of the school. I taught 5th grade recorder class as part of general music, so every kid had to play them for quarter. It was freaking awful. 15 to 20 kids, half of whom were budding criminals, playing out of tune on plastic recorders. I was in the middle of chewing them out yet again, when I heard what sounded like a sneeze combined with a squeak. I look over, and the dumpiest, runkiest boy in the class, the gross kid, if you will, had sneezed with this recorder in his mouth and proceeded to blow clear snot through it and onto his fingers. He sat there for like 15 seconds dumbfounded, with that orange clear plastic recorder just hanging out of his mouth. Finally, I told him to just put it on the table. A few minutes later, I accidentally knocked it on the floor, and it broke, justifying my throwing it away after class. I bought a new one at the 99-cent store because I was not giving that stupid thing to anyone else. Not a teacher, but was a student. One of my classmates had a history presentation. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "Leroy Jenkins!" Nobody had any freaking clue what that meant. Everyone was staring at him while he was just smiling, scanning the room, and slowly started to realize no one knew what he said. His smile quickly went away, and he began his presentation. 2 8th grade boys invented their own language which involved anime-like giggling. Funny thing, these 2 were jocks with decent social status. We had so many parent meetings about how their son's giggling was disruptive in class. The parents were mortified, but the boys wouldn't stop. I was showing a movie once, and this girl and boy were sitting in the back next to each other in a table where 2 people could sit. Anyways, by the middle of the movie, I see the kid has his 2 hands on the table and he is looking away with his eyes wide open while the girl has her hands under the table and is slightly moving. I knew right there and then she was rubbing him. I went discreetly and stood behind them just to confirm, and yes, she was. When I tapped her on the shoulder, I guess it was the adrenaline, he finished, in her hands. The 2 students in front of them saw everything happen. They were news for about 2 weeks and the entire school knew. They're in high school now and still dating. A rare happy ending for this. I'm a male teacher. I once confiscated a note being passed between 6th grade girls. It turned out it was a list, and they ranked all the boys in the grade in terms of attractiveness. I didn't really look at it, but later I showed it to my team, and they pointed out that my name was number 4 on the list. When I was in middle school, we had this dress as an animal day, and all the other kids did stuff like wear a raccoon hat or cat ears, but I was different. I decided to go in a skin-tight How to Tame Your Dragon costume, and the worst part about it was that the yearbook committee dedicated an entire freaking page to me in that crappy costume. I was a volunteer lifeguard at a middle school gym for part of the year. This school also has a swimming month in the gym classes, where students must wear bathing suits bought or ordered via financial aid at the uniform store. There was a highly overweight girl in one of the classes, and she didn't seem to be aware of the standard issue bathing suits. The gym teacher sent home reminders the week before, but I guess she forgot. This girl was picked on a lot in general and always kept to herself. She was very shy. She never spoke. If you called on her to answer a question in front of the class, she would get teary. On the first day, the other students showed up wearing the uniform bathing suits, but she was wearing her bathing suit from home. It also wasn't a particularly pretty bathing suit, as it looked very old ladyish and had a bright orange Hawaiian shirt type of pattern. She stuck out, which you could see in her body language really bothered her. The gym teacher ended up calling her out in front of the whole class, giving her a lecture, and giving her a detention for not wearing her uniform, because that was the rule. Her face turned bright red, and she just stood there silently while other kids stared at her and giggled. You could tell that she wanted to cry, and that her soul had just crumbled. The lecture went on for a very long time. This was a gym teacher who didn't like it when the students disobeyed the rules. I was sitting off to the side, wringing my hands and bouncing my knee in secondhand embarrassment. I wish she had just read the reminder. Poor sweet child. Always read the reminders.
What's your top, holy crap, that worked moment? A guy we'll call Bob left the company I was at. A year or 2 later, he started recruiting people from our company. I was interested, so I flew out for an interview. First 5 interviews went great. Seemed like a good group to work with. The final interview was with the HR director. It went okay, and then we got to the pay part. I said I wanted X amount. She said the average pay for my experience and position was X minus 20K. My response was, Bob didn't fly me out here because I'm average. I have no idea why I said that, but I got the job and the pay I wanted. Months later, when we were getting drinks, Bob brought that up. Apparently, HR director thought I was very quiet and introverted from our interview, so my response caught her even more off guard than it caught me. Used an electric palm sander to clean the soap scum out of my tub. Put a sponge right on the bottom and turned that bad boy on. I thought my tub was just naturally eggshell colored. Nope, it's pure white. I once got fired from a job at the grocery store. I really needed money though, and no other place was hiring. So a week later, I just showed up and started doing my job as usual. No one said anything, and I got my pay at the end of the week like normal, and I stayed at that job until I quit a year later. A very confused patient was fighting me when I was trying to give him IV antibiotics. "You're gonna kill me! What's my family gonna do if you kill me?" he wailed while pointing at his adult son. "If I kill you, they can sue me and the hospital and be rich," I said. The man just kind of made an, "Oh yeah," kind of mumble and let me hook him up to the IV. His son was trying so hard not to laugh. I had a test coming up and needless to say, I didn't want to take it. So 9-year-old me decides to jump out of a tree and fake being hurt. I didn't go to school for the next 2 days. I realize now that I could have just said I fell out of the tree. I didn't actually have to do it. My first edition PS3 stopped working in 2011. It would turn on, but it would never read a disc. About 6 months ago, I randomly found a video on YouTube with like 120 views that was basically a 12-year-old kid showing that if you lift the PS3 vertically when loading a disc, it'll start to read. I tried it and boom, that trick worked. I choose to believe that the child in this video was this commenter's personality from an alternate reality. The 12-year-old was him after he fixed the PS3 in 2011. To get out of an after-hours work event, I came up with the quickest thing I could think of and told my boss that my iguana was sick and I had to get to the pet store to pick up his medication before they closed. I don't have an iguana. The next day, I changed my desktop background to a photo of someone else's iguana. People kept asking me for weeks how my iguana was doing. Had the infamous red rings of death for an old Xbox 360 at one point. Called up a buddy. He told me to turn it off, hold it about 1.5 feet above the floor, and just drop it. I figured that I couldn't make it much worse, so I dropped it. Worked perfectly ever since. My first vehicle was a 1985 Dodge Ram that had about 300,000 miles on it. Needless to say, it wasn't exactly reliable. Anyway, my friend and I had tickets to go see a concert in a city that was about 3 hours away. We made it there just fine and had a blast at the concert. We couldn't afford to stay overnight, so we started on the long journey home. If all went well, we could get home around 3 a.m. There was one stretch of highway where there was 60-ish miles between towns. It's pretty much the worst place to break down on that journey. There were big signs warning travelers to fill up with gas before leaving town, but I had half a tank. My truck sputtered out and died almost halfway between the two towns. It sure sounded like I ran out of gas, but the gauge still showed half a tank. All had not gone well. So there we were, 1:45 a.m., stuck on the side of the highway in Texas, 30 miles from the nearest towns, no moonlight, and this was before teenagers had cell phones. We were screwed. After a bit of poking around with a flashlight, we discovered that we did have fuel, but the fuel pump had died. We decided to sleep in the truck and mess with it in the morning. The fuel pump was inside the engine instead of in the fuel tank, like a modern vehicle. It was powered by the engine instead of an electric motor. Essentially, the fuel pump would constantly pump gasoline when the engine was running, and gas would always be available for the carburetor float valve. The extra pumped gas would just go back into the gas tank. I was just drifting off to sleep when I got an idea. I worked for almost an hour in the pitch dark. I used the same extra hose from an agricultural fertilizer, a drink straw, screw clamps, and duct tape to rig the windshield fluid pump to pump fuel from the fuel line into the carburetor float line. I got in my truck, hit the windshield fluid lever, and the truck started right up. It took a bit of trial and error, but I was able to get the timing down where I knew how often to hit the lever to keep the truck running. We made it back home just after 4:30 a.m. My dad wasn't immediately amused with my handiwork, but he told all of his friends how clever his son was, so I guess it passed the dad test. Please tell me that you didn't keep that same pump in place after you got home. I'm willing to bet a device designed to squirt water isn't going to hold up for long against a more corrosive substance like petrol. Halloween party during college, and everyone is starting to pass out except this very inebriated girl who just won't shut up about wanting someone to turn off the light. I pulled the sleeping bag over her face and said, "Click." She said, "Thank you," and went to sleep. My friend and I looked at each other amazed that it actually worked. Had a laptop slide backward off my lap, hit the floor, and stop working. Showed me an error screen and wouldn't start back up. Decided to turn it over and drop it from the same height onto its opposite side. Why not? It's already broken, right? And it started working again. Have you tried dropping it off and on again? A buddy of mine once did this with his body and a dent in the side of the van, drunk. We asked him how the dent got there and he starts backing up and says, "Well, I was drunk and I stumbled pretty hard and slammed into the van, like this." Long story short, he recreated the drunken fall whilst drunk again and popped the dent right out of the van. As a hardware computer technician, I'm frickin' baffled. This is the kind of fail story we hear way too often. It got dropped twice. How did it get dropped twice? Well, I decided to turn it over and drop it from the same height onto its opposite side, hoping it would fix it. Palm through face. On the flip side, as the great Cade Six once said, everyone loves a bad idea when it works. I work on costumes in theaters in New York City. About 2 years ago, I was sitting in the front row of a show, and a button popped off one of the costumes. The next day, I took it back to the stage door with my resume, and a little note that said, "This came off one of the costumes yesterday, and I thought you might want it back. And while I have your attention, here is my resume." And that is the story of how I got my first job on a Broadway show. One time, a bird got caught in our chimney, and while me and my roommate discussed how to get it out, he suggested we stick our hand up there, and the bird will just land on our finger. I laughed at him and said it would never work. Within 30 seconds, he was walking to the door with a bird perched on his pointer finger. "Hi, narrator here. Is your flatmate Bernie Sanders or Snow White?" I was hiking with a friend and a mountain lion slash cougar slash puma crossed our path about 30 yards ahead of us. My friend turned around and went, "Oh crap," and began to run, at which point the cat started running straight at me. I put my hands up in the air and yelled, "Blood!" and it stopped to a skid and ran in the other direction. I have a Verizon Center staff lanyard that a buddy gave to me from some concert 10 or 12 years ago. It literally says nothing but Verizon Center and staff, white letters on a black background, and then has a small barcode and some illegible gibberish on the other side. It could be entirely fake, as I've never seen anyone else use one like it. So far, 3 free concerts and 1 free NBA game. Half afraid to keep using it, especially since the arena changed its name. I can't get anyone else in with it, so while I can literally go anywhere, I have to do it alone, which is much less fun. I once showed up 8 hours late for work. My company was trying out this crazy 3-shift schedule and would change every day, but there was no order to the scheme. If you didn't check what the manager put out that day, no one knew when they should be at work the next day. So after a hard shift, I forgot to check that bad boy. And when I came in the next day expecting to arrive at the shift change, everyone was at their desks working away. Someone sees me and asks, "Hey, did you get moved to this shift?" I picked up a clipboard and said, "No, just here to, inspect." I spent about 10 minutes walking around the office just nodding or scribbling notes before I went home. Not only did I not work that day, one of the managers thought it was awesome that someone was checking up on projects. In college, I had one class where the professor was very disorganized. He was always losing crap and forgetting to grade stuff. It was a small class, so there were only 7 of us, and we decided to do an experiment. On the day of exam, we asked him if he had graded the exam already, and being the disorganized mess that he was, he said yes. So that day, we never took the exam, and a few weeks later, everyone received a 100. His explanation was that he couldn't find the exam papers, but was sure everyone studied hard and did a good job. By the way, we didn't scheme to get out of an exam, and as far as I know, everyone studied. We just thought to do it for laughs, but it ended up working out well. The time I avoided getting in trouble by being really boring. About 6 years ago, I was at my ex-girlfriend's house on a Sunday. Behind her house was a service center for city vehicles. So, since it was a government building, it was closed on Sundays. Behind the main building was a trail that you can walk down for a couple of minutes and get into a subdivision. So me and my ex decided to drive down the head of the trail behind the building and try out the mini bong I had recently purchased. So we pull up and I take the bong out, and I am holding it out the window, pouring a bit of water into it when I look in the mirror. There is a frickin' cop car 15 feet behind me flying up, and here I am dangling a bong out the window in front of them. I bring the bong back in and throw it under my seat and push a sweater on top of it. The cop car has now pulled up right behind me, and 2 cops are dashing up to the side of the car. "What's going on? You can't be back here. It's trespassing," said the cop on my side of the car. "Oh, hey officer, we were just, going geocaching." "What's that now?" "Geocaching, sir. Here, look." And I take my hiking GPS out of the dash and show it to him. I then go on a 10-minute long spiel about geocaching and what's it all about, and I am super dry about the whole thing. My speech ends and I'm looking at him and he just says, "Okay then, well, have a nice day." Should I leave, sir? You said this was trespassing after all." Don't worry about it." And both cops get in the car and left. No idea how that worked. It's good to know that if I ever get into trouble with the law, I might be able to get out of it this way. I'll just describe my editing process for this job. Some other comments to this post read, "The police fled for fear of being bored to death. Jeez, trespass or whatever, I don't care. Nerds." Moved offices at work. Tried admin/password on the new router login page. Who has 2 thumbs and higher bandwidth? This guy. In our dorms, the PCs in the rooms had throttled internet, but in the shared labs, they didn't. They told us this was only during certain evening times, but it was patently obvious it was round the clock. I went into the lab, got the Mac from one of the lab PCs, and gave it my Mac. I was on the lab subnet from then on and had much faster internet. I did this for a few friends and told some others about it. Applied for a job at a French fry factory. The online application asked, "What makes you want to work for us?" I simply put, "Potatoes are my favorite food." HR lady and engineering manager loved it. Been working there 10 months now. My friend applied to Bed Bath & Beyond. During the interview, they asked why she wanted to work there. Her response was, "I grasp the concept of beds and baths. It's the beyond that I'm most interested in." She was not hired. Anytime I brought a girl home from the bar in college, because my go-to move was just look around till a girl made eye contact and then nod. Whenever it worked, I was pretty amazed at the results with such a lack of effort. To clarify, it's a nod up, like you're saying, "Hey, what's up?" Also, it works well for any attractiveness because it helps you understand what level or type of girls are into you, and you avoid the awkwardness of just trying to hit on random girls that may have no interest in you. Good luck to everyone trying to meet someone at a bar. It works surprisingly well. I got my current girlfriend by making eye contact with her across the room and pointing finger guns at her. Didn't know her at all. I'd also like to bring up that she loves my terrible puns, and that's actually how I sealed the deal the next day. Never stop following your dreams. In high school, I told a girl who was way out of my league, "So you should give me your number." She asked, "Why would I do that?" I said, "Because if I just dial randomly, it'll take forever to call you." Waited to be shot down, but she laughed and gave it to me. We were together for 7 years. My son was living nearby and had locked himself out of his room. He called me for help. During my many assignments in the military, I was once stationed with a guy who was also a locksmith, incessantly told me about locks, lockpicks, tumblers, etc. So I showed up at my son's apartment, armed with a basic knowledge about how locks work, and 2 paper clips. I half straightened them out, used one to flick the tumblers, and the other to pull at the bottom of the lock to turn it. 2 minutes later, I was in. My son says, "Holy crap, you did it!" Got serious dad points for that one. I went to New York City for Fashion Week with the boutique I was working for. After the fashion show we attended, everyone wanted to go out clubbing. Me, being young and new, I didn't want to be the buzzkill. So I went with them even though I was only 18. Arriving at the first club, we were allowed to skip the line because we knew people, and we get to the bouncer. He's going one by one, checking everyone's IDs, and I'm sweating bullets. When he got to me, we just looked at each other. He goes, "ID." And I freeze, and for some reason I said, "Man, I already showed you mine." Until this day, I don't know if he was being nice or just didn't want to look stupid, but he let me in. Needless to say, I got hammered off $18 mixed drinks because F it, right? For about 10 years, I had a wart on the bottom of my foot. A really big, ugly, better not date a dude with a foot obsession kind of wart that was probably about 1.5 centimeters across. I'd tried pretty much everything to get rid of it, short of going for what I was told was the painful cryosurgery to get rid of it. When I'd eventually had enough of having a blob the size of a Volkswagen Beetle on my foot, I decided to book an appointment with my doctor to have it removed surgically. Then I read about duct tape occlusion therapy. The basic idea is you put a patch of duct tape, stick it over a wart, and wait. If the tape falls off, you put another piece on and, well, that's pretty much it. Bollocks, I thought. There's no way that'll do anything. But duct tape is cheap and I'm strongly averse to pain, so I figured, why not give it a try? A couple of weeks later, no verruca. It very much enjoys the pro-science, anti-alternative medicine side of me, but whether it's placebo or not, I can't deny that it worked. So now you can date dudes with a foot obsession. So this thread led me on a merry chase through the internet to check out duct tape occlusion theory and… And here I've been burning off mine with apple cider vinegar like an idiot. Rewind to my junior year of college, and everyone's packed into a living room and boozing heavily in preparation for Super Bowl 49. Literally 10 minutes before kickoff, a half-filled cup of milk gets spilled on top of the cable box, and the picture instantly cuts out. Insanity ensues. One quick-thinking individual, not me, decides to call the cable company and gets through to a customer service rep, and we explain the problem. She just says, "Oh, not a problem, sir. Just let me reset your cable box remotely from here." Within 30 seconds, the pregame turned right back on, and we didn't even miss kickoff. This witch remotely evaporated milk from a cable box. Why was there milk on the cable box if y'all were heavily boozing? Chicago, 2004. At a tech conference and been dancing with this amazingly hot woman at a bar near the events hotel we are all staying at. We get into the elevator after closing time with 8 other dudes, all of whom have been working to get time with her. I'm on the 4th floor of a 30-story hotel. She's somewhere in the high 20s. Door opens at my floor. I say, "This is me," as I'm in the back of the elevator with her. She says, "I'm really thirsty." And I immediately reply, "I have water in my room." Great, let's go. Married for 13 years now, together from that night forward. I woke up the next morning and we decided to spend the rest of our lives mornings together that day. She moved states 3 weeks later, and we wed 4 months after that. 2 kids and a very happy life followed that cheesy line. We have this maths course that's necessary for my major at school. I loathe math and might actually be a little number dyslexic. Dyscalculia for those interested. For this reason, I didn't take the course too seriously, and then when I had to get my butt into gear, could not understand the end of the course material whatsoever. Fast forward to finals time, and I needed greater than 88% on the exam in this class to pass, and it wasn't going to happen, so I decided to study for my other exams and just retake the course. I decided to at least go to the exam and bullcrap it using Excel. Test was in a proctored lab and Excel was an allowed tool, as well as my limited math knowledge and whatever test-taking skills I had. Guessed on a majority of the questions, muttered the old YOLO, and hit submit. Frickin' 89%. Literally guessed my way to passing a class. May not be the grandest achievement, but I've never had pure laziness and apathy work out like that before. Just goes to show you kids, hard work is for the birds. Not me, but Buzz Aldrin repaired a jammed switch using a ball pen. On the moon. On a switch critical for their takeoff. Not me. Oh, really? I'm not buying it. I think he needs to prove that he isn't in fact Buzz Aldrin.
Let's hear the other side. Guys of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing a girl has ever said to you? I remember one time this one girl who was oddly talkative in my options and fixed income class kept talking and asking me about my personal life. Then, when she added me as a Facebook friend, there was a message with it that said, "Found you, smiley face." Pretty uncomfortable. I was talking to a girl on the phone who at the time was messed up on painkillers and started relating to me a story about how when she was 7, she pushed a girl into a pool and watched her drown. Her grandma came home, found out about it, and told her to tell the police it was an accident. That should have been a warning sign right there. I kept some of your hair. 20-year high school reunion. Copied from an email I received from a stalker 7 years ago. When you and her have your baby, rest assured, I'll be the one that raises it. Haha, no! When I was about 17 years old, I worked at a cafeteria and some girls, 11 and 13, were chasing me for weeks. They even waited in front of my door when I had to go to work to chase me all the way up there. One day I was working and the cafeteria was full with people when the 11-year-old girl said, "When can I give you head?" Everyone instantly looked at me. Uncomfortable isn't even the right word to describe my feelings at that moment. Ugh, I thought I had nothing to contribute until you reminded me. Back in middle school when I was maybe 13 or so, I used to go to a pretty large school, roughly grades 5 to 12, all in the same interconnected complex of buildings. That meant there was always a huge number of students milling around the place during lunch break, and since it was a quite large area, you were often surrounded by strangers. Anyway, at one point I heard through the grapevine, which, as a social outcast, was nothing I was terribly familiar with, that this girl a grade or 2 below me liked me. Being socially inept, I just checked if the girl was pretty, noticed she wasn't, and ignored the whole thing. Well, the girl didn't take being ignored for long. She got her cousin, who was more or less the bully of my grade, to pay me a visit with his cronies, pick me, and carry me to go see her one lunch period. They literally half-dragged, half-carried me across the whole school complex to see this girl, and held me there while we talked. Imagine your worst early teen conversation where one party is shyly talking to her crush, and the other is awkwardly trying to put her off, all while being physically restrained and watched by bullies. I suppose this doesn't really compare to the trauma of being propositioned by an 11-year-old when you're 17, but oh man was it awkward. Sadly, subsequent girls have been far less forward. Making out with the girl I was seeing, lightly slide my hand up her chest, and as my hand is going to caress her neck, she grabs it around her neck and forces me to choke her, which is fine. She then proceeded to call out her brother's name, which I assume was less fine. This happened to a friend of mine I was living with. I won't go into it, but the situation we were in demanded we shared a bunk bed. We had a rule that we could bring girls home so long as we kept the noise down. One night, while sleeping, my friend brings this girl home with him. I woke up to them coming in as they went up to his bunk to start messing around. I hear the typical stuff at first. Lip smacks, heavy breathing, some moaning. Then it happened. I hear the girl whisper to my friend the words, "Are you down with the funk?" In retrospect, my friend says he said yes because the chick was hot and he didn't want to ruin the night. So he says, "Yeah, baby, I'm down with the funk for sure." Almost immediately, the girl takes off her panties, stands up on the bunk, turns around, squats, and takes a dump. Right on his chest. Luckily for him, it wasn't the messy sort, but as you can imagine, the guy lost his crap. No pun intended. He tossed her off the bunk and started screaming for a girl to get the heck out of his house. Meanwhile, I'm on the bottom bunk laughing my butt off. So, not really the creepiest thing a woman's ever said, but now you know what the funk is. This has ruined my perception of funk music forever. I was over at her dorm room, and after we got done with our business, I spotted a bottle of my cologne on her desk. I asked her about it, and she says she sprayed it around to make her room smell like me. Okay. Next week, she gets into my car, makes a big sound, and says, "Oh, smells like you in here." She started rubbing herself. No joke. En route to Kroger. Okay. Few weeks later, at her dorm room, I decide to get a little nosy. I find the following. 1. Aforementioned bottle of cologne. 2. 2 pairs of my dirty undies, not left by me. 3. Pair of my dirty socks, again, not left by me. And this freaked me out more than anything for some reason. Number 4. Envelope with what I can only assume to be, drumroll, my body hair in it. Not okay. I break up with her over ICQ, the good old days. She informs me that she left a bag in my apartment. It's under my bed. In said bag is a bunch of completely random crap with Kmart tags still on it. It was obviously a plant meant to force us to have an awkward post-breakup makeup reunion. Nay, says I. Got my army buddy to drive me over to her dorm in his Ford Festiva. I saw her on the curb waiting, crying. I launched that bag out the window and we took off as fast as that Festiva would go. Never did see if the bag hit her, but given its trajectory, it's highly likely. For those who will want to know, the cologne I was wearing was Old Spice. I was dating a girl called Allison. My grandma is also called Allison. I had mentioned that I found it a little weird that they had the same name, so once as we were screwing, she asked, "Does this make you think of your grandma?" It didn't. Until then. I once went to a ski resort where people of different nationalities were there. A young Chinese girl introduced herself to me the day I was leaving and asked for my number, so I gave it to her. She called me about a week later and asked me if I wanted to go over to her place for a dinner party. I thought to myself, sure, why not? So I turn up with some booze and find about 24 young Chinese girls and no guys. None of the girls spoke any English except the girl who invited me. They sat me down at the end of the table, spoke in Chinese all night while looking in my direction and giggled all the way through. I had no idea what they were saying. At the end of the night, the hostess asked me if I would be so kind to pose for individual photos with each one of them separately. I hesitated, but went along with it. They giggled hysterically throughout, and still only spoke Chinese. No idea what the heck that was all about, but I got seriously creeped out. Edit. No banging involved, those girls were young. I'm a regular guy. Only thing I can think of is they thought maybe I looked like someone famous, though I don't think I do. Okay, some people are making a big thing about the booze thing. In Australia, it's traditional to bring some wine when invited to a dinner party. Also here, the legal drinking age is 18. The girl I met was no younger than 18, I thought, so it was all cool. I was in my mid-20s then, so by young, I meant they were too young for me, though technically it would have been perfectly legal. I'm no predator, I just like girls to be around my age, but not younger by a huge margin. Also, the hostess told me none of them ever drank alcohol, which made me think that they were slightly on the innocent side. Unrelated, but I can't even read half of these because they're so messed up. For example, a girl I hadn't even dated carved my initials into her ankle. She received no wahoo. Had a girl request me to break into her apartment, make her hot chocolate in her kitchen while she's scared in her bedroom, and then come in and bang her. You know this was all just a ruse to get you to make her a hot chocolate, right? I had a girl I once kissed at a party proceed to send me pictures of her crying, half naked, and makeup smeared all over her face Joker style. She won't stop calling me or sending random pictures of herself with distressed or angry face. This has been going on for 3 months now. This is a toss-up between, look at these, before showing me hundreds of bits of paper the girl had written my name on over and over again when we'd been out once, or the time I woke up from a lovely wahoo dream to find my girlfriend gripping my member and asking me over and over again, who do you think I am? Do you want all your stuff back? After we broke up, I had not given her anything. She had stolen it all over time. She had it couriered to me. We then ended up having pillow talk a few months later over email. I found out later that it was her sister mailing. And this stuff she sent back was a photo album entirely filled with pictures of me sleeping. Good times. I had to borrow a girl's computer once for a group project in college. I got to the group meeting and there was a password. I called her and after 10 minutes, she finally gave me the password, which was her first name and my last name. Okay, but low-key, that's kind of sweet.
Your lips looked dry while you were sleeping, so I licked them for you.
Wife and I were in town with our son, visiting my parents when an old high school friend, she was only ever a friend, came by to meet my wife and 2-year-old son. After we all sat and talked for a few hours, and what after felt like a pretty normal night of company, we all got up to say goodnight and the friend hugged my wife goodbye, then turned to me, grasped me very firmly into a hug, kissed me on the lips, then whispered into my ear, "Your son should have been ours. I love you," then turned around like it was totally normal and waved goodbye to us and left. My wife didn't see or hear any of it, and I never told her. She thinks the girl is a decent person and will never see her again. I love you with all of my heart. Let's run away and get married. Not creepy yet? I was 12. She was 42. Not directly to me, but a friend of mine's mom referred to me as a tasty little snack when I was 15. And no, she was not a MILF. Not even close. I went to a football game with this girl. Afterwards, I went to meet her dad, which was already kind of weird. He said to her, "Is this the boy you've been talking about for the past 3 months?" I had known the girl for 4 days. So I did this chick that lived near me, only a few times over a few days. She got really attached to the point of freaky, so I backed off. Within a month, she was at a mental institution. 2 weeks after that, she gets back and happens to be sitting with her mom outside when I got home from work, so I could either ignore her completely or interact. I greeted them nicely and asked how she was, not mentioning where she just was. She stared at me for like a minute straight with the most blank, creepy face I've ever seen, and finally said something. "Are you the one that was controlling my mind?" Nope. I can poop bigger than you can, as she began dropping her pants. To be fair, we were only 3 or 4 years old at the time behind my parents' garage. And though I lost that contest, I married her years later and have since upped my game. I was literally almost inside of this girl and some intimate talk is going on, and she whispers, "You know why I've always liked you?" I asked why, and she said, "You remind me of my dad." I still banged her, but I didn't call her for a while after that. Girl I had slept with 2 times, without knowing her or her friends. We were neighbors. "My friends saw you at Bar X on Saturday. I thought you said you weren't going out." "How did they know it was me? I never met any of your friends." "They've seen pictures." "Pictures of what?" "Of you sleeping." Did anybody else get reminded of that overly attached girlfriend meme from like 12 years ago, or was that just me? In a big group of people. "Could I have some vodka?" "You've had way too much." "I'll give you head for some vodka." "I'm good." "I'll do it anyway." She told me she wanted to be the father of our children. Let that sink in for a bit. This one's a bit of a long one, and it's kind of gross, so just a fair warning. I'm 20. A pretty sort of rock and roll 24-year-old girl asks me out at the spring this past summer. I say yes. We have a decent date. She says she's leaving the next morning for New York City for a month's time. I figured this means she wants purely to use me for Wahoo because she asked me to come over at 12:30 at night and has been out drinking with friends. I say yes. She comes over. We have fun. She was uncoordinated and spoke atrocities while we did this awfully clumsy mushing. The worst I've ever experienced, blame on her behalf. After, I expect her to believe because she's verbalized that she has a flight at 10 a.m., but no, she lingers. For hours. Until well past 5 a.m. I can't bring myself to hint that she should leave, so I go with it. Lying naked next to me, breaking a long silence of hours in which I've fallen asleep, she wakes me and says, "When I was 12 to 15 years old, demons would try and enter my spirit, my soul, late at night while I slept. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I know so." You can imagine the terror as my eyes grew wide and I grew rigid, staring at the ceiling above me in the blackened room. She continues, "They succeeded once, and I became possessed. I couldn't control myself. I started hurting myself and becoming intimately violent. Sometimes, I think they're coming back for me. I want you to hurt me so they can't." I had to kindly show her out after explaining that I was growing much too uncomfortable. The worst part, I wake up the next morning and expect the protection we had used, now lying on the floor, as I pick it up to trash it. Part of why our intimacy felt strange was that there was some texture I felt unfamiliar. Blood. Blood everywhere. It had just been overlooked the night prior due to my bedspread being all black. Man, the blood. So, a girl had a crush on me. One morning when I came home to my place, there was a bag hanging on my front door. I bring it inside and see what's in it. I find a new set of pencils. There was also a spoon that I used to feed babies along with a bottle of baby food. A tiny pink hair clip I'd imagine a 9-year-old girl might wear. A 3-page letter telling me the letter was written by a Polish girl who just moved into town. She called herself Tatiana Dongchert. I think it's Polish, I'm not entirely sure. And she wanted to meet new people in town. So she asked if I wished to bake Doppler cookies with her down by an abandoned warehouse at the docks. Yes, that is what she wrote. Then, as the letter progressed, the text looked more and more as if someone wrote it while driving a bike. At the end of the letter, it was more like random words. Later that same week, someone tried to open my door in the middle of the night. Then, another week passes, and I get a visit at 5 in the morning from some staff from a home nearby where she apparently lived. They told me they found her sleeping in my bushes and that she had run away every night for the last 2 weeks and that she was very ill at the time. They gave me a number to call in case of an emergency. I did not sleep well that following month. Hold on, stop. That's my husband calling. The husband that she said she divorced from who was overseas in Iraq. She wanted me to wait in silence until after the phone call to get right back at it. Stood by the door the whole time, too, to make sure I didn't leave. Nope. Special Cambodian spice. It didn't sound creepy at the time, but I'd asked my wife of 25 years what the unusual black seasoning on the meal she'd just given me was. Turned out, it was a pharmaceutical in the class of beta blockers. By pure luck, I ate only maybe 1/10 the amount present rather than all of it. An hour later, I nearly died. Weak and intermittent heartbeat. A few months before she'd got me to take out life insurance. Beta blockers in more than tiny amounts stop the heart. Looks like a natural heart attack. She's Cambodian, by the way. Yeah, because I was really wondering about the veracity of your statement regarding her status as Cambodian when I'm more concerned about the fact she nearly killed you, dude! My first girlfriend, read-only girlfriend, found me packing my stuff to get the heck out and pulled a sword on me, like a real katana. Said if I packed another freaking thing, she would cut off my head and keep it in a jar. I very carefully explained that I was just moving things, all was well. I hugged the psycho, then left in the dead of night and spent the rest of the night at the train station till I could get the heck out of Dodge. For the next 6 months, she sent me nightly messages on various websites accusing me of being a demon and attacking her while she slept in the dream world, and I should be careful because she was going to fight back with witchcraft. Then, she recruited other crazies, and they were saying the same crap. There was this army of her and a bunch of underage girls, one of which was apparently my then 23-year-old ex-girlfriend's new true love, waging internet war on me for being an evil dream demon and trying to take over the dream world. Since then, yeah, pretty much double rainbow gay. Dudes aren't freaking insane, and when they are, you can tell pretty easily. I found half a bag of toenail clippings in her closet, and when I confronted her about it, she said, "Yeah, I like to save them for later when I want a midnight snack." I got the heck out of there, needless to say. Over at the apartment of some girl I knew from wherever, and basically there to just have wahoo. Just going through the formalities of acting like we're not. She pulls out a photo album. First and ever page, a miscarried baby, dressed up in a bonnet on a silk pillow. I actually found it reassuring that the pictures weren't just thrown in with our other family photos. 4th of July at Uncle Ted's, Labor Day, dead baby, dead baby, dead baby, Thanksgiving, dead baby's first Halloween, Catwoman of course, Christmas after that crazy blizzard on Mount Hood, dead baby, ooh, ski trip. Ex-girlfriend of almost a year, who I thought had moved away, bombarded me at work one day and said, "Look what I did for you. Will you take me back now?" She had the Chinese characters for I love you and my initials tattooed on her arm. I would have to say when a girl I barely knew figured out my class schedule, she would leave me letters in sealed envelopes, giving them to my teachers to give to me. This one time, me and this girl who seemed interesting enough had a conversation. "If you'd have to kill me, how would you do it?" What? Do I really have to answer? "Yes, I need to know." "Well, I'd probably shoot you, something quick and painless." "Aw, why not just stab me into the stomach with a rusty knife?" "Abandon ship! Abandon all hope, ye who enter!" I had a girl open with a necrophilia joke. That's how far she got all night. Just a quick heads up, exploitation of minors in this one. This will probably get buried, but I knew a girl in high school that was pretty sought after. She was small, blonde, busty, and had a killer smile. She loved gaming, anime, sweet tea, boiled peanuts, the whole shebang. I never bothered flirting with her or anything because she just always had so many guys practically tripping over one another to talk to her or sit next to her at lunch. We had computer and geometry class together and sat right next to each other through assigned seating, so we got to talking here and there and had a lot of laughs. We started enjoying it so much that we started writing each other notes back and forth in class, then entire letters throughout the whole day. Then she started inviting me over to stay the night. Her parents were okay with it, and they never came to check on us or anything. I got the impression that I was not the first boy she brought home. So of course we had wahoo, and I lost my virginity that night. Things are going smoothly over the next couple weeks, and she starts stepping it up on the kinky meter. First she admits that she thinks threesomes are interesting. Okay. Then she says she likes furries. Alright. Then that she likes older and younger men. I don't even know what the heck that means, but this girl is letting me sleep with her on a regular basis, so I don't care. Then the letters she starts writing me in class get really graphic, asking questions like what would I do if my dad walked in on us doing it, and if he would join, or if I would come to her house after school and pee on her in her bathtub. At this point, I put a lot of space between us, and a couple of days later, she confesses to me that she cheated on me in a threesome with 2 older men. She was really broken up about it, but I saw it as a get-out-of-jail-free card. A year later, she starts dating a friend of mine who was only 15. Keep in mind, she was about 20. I warned him that she was a bit loose in the head, but being 15 and with the busty blonde, he didn't care either. Past time forward again, I go to hang out with them at his house. Turns out she's pregnant and they're hiding it as best they can. Things come to a head when his parents find out. Cops get called. They find pictures of them banging together, which was exploitation of a minor. So they raid her house. They find that her parents are drug dealers and an immense amount of CP on her computer, some that include herself when she was younger. Turns out, her mother used to make the videos of her sleeping with older men and would sell them. Needless to say, she's in jail now and there is an ongoing custody fight. TLDR, lost my virginity to a cheese pizza actress. Got stalked by a crazy. Followed our band around for a while, but I wasn't interested as I had my eye on someone else at the time. I was playing a gig at a pub. She walked in, took off her clothes in front of the stage, took a knife out of her handbag, declared her eternal love while touching herself, and threatened to kill any woman that went near me. I'd never spoken to her or anything else before. The police eventually took her away, but I was reminded of my grandfather's advice at the time. If you're gonna date a woman, date the one that irritates you the least and never, ever date crazy. Good advice, but what if you'd never spoken to her before or shown any interest? The woman had a history of mental issues stemming from a brutal childhood. She was committed to long-term care, and it turned out she had a thing for musicians, as other fellas I knew had the same experience with her at various venues. Stunning-looking woman, but not playing with the full deck at the time. I hope she's got herself sorted out since then. Not to me, but here's the deal. This happened not very long ago to a friend. He tried online dating, and some cute girl messaged him to hang out one night. Verified her, and she looked the real deal. Gets to her place, and she's dressed up to go clubbing with another friend of hers who's on the computer. As he walks in, her friend yells, "Oh my god, I got another one! We're at 6!" My friend raises an eyebrow but hangs out for a bit. They start chatting and drinking, all is good. And then, by surprise, like 4 other guys show up minutes apart. She walks to where they are and says, "We only need 2 more," or something like that. At this point, my friend is freaked out and asks what the heck is going on. Turns out these girls were deciding to invite all the tall guys on the site and then making them compete for their attention in person. Game show type environment. TLDR, some girls on a dating website invite a whole bunch of guys to their place and play "I only want the best, the rest can leave." Now that's creepy.
What's your "what the frickin' frick is this" moment in your dating history? So I've known this guy for almost a year now. Not really good friends or anything, more casual acquaintances. We have a bunch of common friends and see each other from time to time, parties, etc. A couple of months ago, he started messaging me, first on Facebook, then by text. He got my number from a friend of mine, he didn't ask me for it. And most of the time, I responded just to be polite. He's nice enough, but not really my type. So when we started dropping hints about meeting up, I just turned him down and said I'm busy or would just catch up next time there's a gathering with our friends. That sort of thing. Fast forward to last week and he asked me out again, which, if I recall correctly, is the 6th time in the past 2 months. I finally decided to at least give him a chance, cause hey, what could go wrong anyway? And who knows what I'm missing and all that jazz. Worst case scenario, it would be awkward, but we've talked more than a few times, so I was thinking it can't be that bad, and we could actually have a pleasant time. Date night comes, and we meet up in the city after work. We have dinner, nice, cutesy Japanese place, conversation was okay. I was certain at this point that it's really not going to take off, he really isn't my type, but I was having a pleasant enough time and he was a total gentleman and not bad to talk to. The bill comes, and I was going to suggest a quick coffee before heading home. However, he said that there's something he had made an appointment for us for, and we need to rush off and make it in time. I was a bit intrigued and excited. Was it a movie or a show? A play? As he knows I'm into theater. So we hurry off and he took me to a high-end luxury mall with an attached wing for offices. We went up, wait, this is an office lobby. What the? It was a frickin' weight loss center. So he explains that he's part of this company, he works for them part-time basis as a distributor, and he wanted to introduce me to their products, which would revolutionize my lifestyle, and make me the healthiest I've been in my entire life. For your information, I'm 5'5" and 135 pounds. I was totally stunned at this point, so I was just nodding like an idiot the whole time we were walking inside. He then left me with his smarmy teammates, who proceeded to give me an orientation about their company and a run-through of their health supplements. When he got to the part where the weight loss products are, the smarmiest one said, "Ooh, now this is what you've been waiting for. I've saved the best for last." I just sat through it because I knew that if I started to say something, I was definitely going to burst and make a spectacle of myself. There was a seminar ongoing and we were at a little table to the side. After I flat out said that I'm not interested in any of the products and frankly don't believe that I need health supplements, I eat well and exercise regularly, they started on the second phase, introducing me to the business aspect of it. Basically, it was a networking model of business where you not only sell the products, you also recruit people to sell them, and they would be under your team, and you get a commission for every sale they make. They rhapsodized about the wonders of the product, how easy it is to sell, and how much money I could be making, because they could tell I have the right kind of personality and network for it. Registration was only $1,000, and it was consumable in products, which I could either use or sell to get my registration money back immediately. I wish I could say I flipped the effing table and screamed at them to F themselves with their health supplements and hope they overdose on their products. But no, right after the talk, I just said I should head home since it was getting a bit late. The guy actually messaged me to say that he had a good time and he hopes to see me again, and that I would consider their products and the business opportunity. I called up some friends and went out for drinks because F your health supplements, that's why. You know, I've been on some bad dates in my life, but none of them were join my pyramid scheme bad. I'll take my dates being into unexpected kinks any day, I suppose. When I was a teenager, I worked at a retail store in the mall, and a guy who worked a few stores down would always come in and talk to me. He was super sweet and genuine and would randomly take me to lunch or bring me coffee and the like. It was just nice to have someone to talk to and who seemed genuinely interested in me and what I had to say. He asked me on a date a few times, and I always declined. I don't like the idea of dating someone who I work with or work next to, just in case it goes sour. After a month or two, I finally agreed to go on a date with him, because good guys are hard to find. I couldn't just let him pass by. He picks me up at my house, and on our way to dinner, we get into a car accident. The driver's side was T-boned pretty badly, and we ended up having to go to the hospital where he contacted his roommate, who then contacted my date's girlfriend. After my freshman year of college, I met a guy on OkCupid, and we went to get dinner at Fridays as our first date. Offered to give me a ride, but I said no. He was a couple of years older, well-dressed, and started talking about how he'd started his own business after college, and it was going well. Good for him. Bragging a bit, but hey, that's an accomplishment. So after we order, he says, "Let's play a game. We'll each take out our wallets and compare what's in them." Wasn't a joke, literally just started showing me his credit cards and bragging about the high limits, ending with a, "Clearly, you can't afford to pay for this dinner, but don't worry, I could cover you." I was annoyed and protested, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. So as we leave, he says he wants to show me his car. Unfortunately, it was before mine in the lot, so I had to walk by. It was a white, windowless serial killer van. He begged me to bang him in it, right there in the Fridays parking lot. I was pretty glad I drove separately. A guy I met 3 days previously offered to pick me up and hang out. I was cool with that, but he ended up dragging me around on errands. We went to his dentist appointment, and then when I said I wanted to leave, he said he'd give me a ride home, but only in exchange for oral fun times. I was pretty scared about dating after that. And no, I did not take him up on his offer. I got out right there and walked to a bus stop. I went on a date with a guy that I met online. He told me to dress nice and that he was going to take me out for dinner. He took me to Subway, ordered a foot-long teriyaki chicken sub, looked at me and said, "I hope you like teriyaki chicken." We shared the sub in his car. Safe to say, there was no second date. Narrator here, so you're telling me my main dating strategy is wrong? Went to pick up a girl at her house after meeting on a dating website. She seemed significantly larger than her photo, but only in the lower abdominal region. This is when I realized that she had failed to mention that she was pregnant. Guy I worked with kept asking me out. I continuously said no. After about a year, I started to feel bad for the guy and said yes to a date. He asked me to lunch, so I figured it could be a quick, easy date. He picked me up and took me to Wendy's. where he made me order off the dollar menu, and I could only get 2 things. After this very quiet lunch where he hunkered over his chicken nuggets like I would steal them, he said he needed to stop at Walmart. We go in and he heads to the lotion section. Strange, but whatevs. He then grabs 2 scented lotions and asks which one I like better. Being nice, I pick one, and he responds with, "Great, I'll use this for your massage." Luckily, I had to work in 2 hours and told him the massage would have to wait. I spent 3 months trying to avoid him until he quit. Well, I had this major crush on this girl. She was gothish, which isn't my thing normally, but this woman was extremely intelligent and cool. So the first date is good, we have a good time, we're both drunk, and we go back to my place. Mind you, she's very open with her sexuality, so things get hot and heavy. Right when the action is going to start, she says, "I don't actually want to do this." Imagine a semi-truck slamming on its brakes. "Okay," I say, "that's fine. We just sleep off our drink." This exact same thing happens a second time, and I'm starting to get annoyed, only because it's painfully obvious that our mutual actions during the date are leading to adult fun times. Finally, it happens a third time, and I decide I'm over this girl. About a year later, I find out from her friend that she was hoping I would act out an unspeakable act. She wants me to be like, "Screw that, we're doing this." I pointed out that this would in fact constitute an actual unspeakable act, not acting one out. I then found out she had herpes, so in the end, me for the win. On my first date with a guy off an internet dating site, he took us to the Scientology Museum in London. I thought, original, easy to find things to talk about, laugh at the craziness of this, it could be fun. He then proceeds to read every single piece of writing on every single exhibit, ask the attendant very probing questions about how one goes about joining Scientology, etc., and sounding slightly too interested to just be intrigued about religion. Also, he was visibly sweating. Once we were done there, we went for a glass of wine, and he told me he used to shoot heroin. I was out of there like a shot. In college, this guy from one of my classes asked me to go out with him out of the blue. We'd never even talked before, but he was pretty cute, so I said sure. We exchanged numbers and he said he'd call me with details. He called the next day and told me we were going to a restaurant that was way out of my price range. We're talking like, no way this bill will be under $100. I tried talking him out of it, and when that didn't work, flat out saying I couldn't afford something like that. But he insists and tells me not to worry. This all really should have been a clue to me. So I say fine and we agree to go. We get to the restaurant and waiter comes over and I go to order, the cheapest thing on the menu, when he stops me and says, "Ignore her, we're both having the steak." But I don't like steak. "She's just saying that because she's poor. We'll have steak," and shoos the waiter away. I'm mortified and angry and want to leave, but he was my ride. He tries to make conversation and just proves to me that he really is a butt. He then says that he has to go to the bathroom and leaves. I'm sitting there for a good 10 minutes before he texts me, "Ha ha ha, I got the squirts from drinking last night, don't eat without me." And that was the last straw. I call the waiter over, pay for my meal, and go to the Starbucks down the street to call my friend to pick me up. In summary, guy was trying to impress me and was the world's biggest butt. Just to clear some things up, I paid for just my meal, not his, and I'm well aware I didn't owe him anything. I just wanted to make a clean break from this guy. I know for a fact that bad dates are not a gender-exclusive experience, but I can't help noticing that the girls seem to have a disproportionate number of horror stories in this thread. Funny that. I went on a few dates with a guy in college. At first I was excited because I found him attractive and he said yes to a dinner date. Turns out even attractive people can be a bag of crazy. First we go out to an Italian restaurant. He orders spaghetti with regular sauce, no meatballs. Out of curiosity, I ask if he's tried anything else on the menu he could recommend. "Nope, I only ever order spaghetti." Food comes and he proceeds to lean over his plate, shovel the spaghetti in his mouth and use his lips to cut the rest back on his plate. I'm no snob. I've eaten spaghetti like that before. Just never in public. He says it's the right way to eat it. He asks if I'd like to go see a movie. I'm not feeling the vibe, so I decline, make up some project I need to finish. He tells me he loves the movies, wishes he could just live in one all the time. Alright, well, thanks for the date. A week later, he asks me out again. I decide to give him another shot. Maybe I was being overly judgmental or petty. We agree to go out for a pizza and see a movie. I pick him up at his house and we go to Pizza Hut at his insistence. Best pizza on the planet, he tells me about 3 times on the way there. We get there and he orders a personal pan for himself. That was a first. Okay, he didn't want to share the bill maybe. I order one for myself and just let it go. Again, worrying maybe I'm being judgy. Bill comes and he pays, so now I'm really confused, but whatever. I'm not going to call him out, not worth it. Movie ended up being back at his house where, surprise, he lives with his parents. His dad asks me what I'm in school for, and when I tell him, he lectures me that I should go to school for teaching, since that's what he does. Okay, nice meeting you. We never did watch the movie, spent the rest of the evening with him showing me all his WWF wrestling memorabilia and bossing his mother around Cartman style. His life goal was to get his old job at Blockbuster back, since it was the most fun he'd ever have. His favorite way to spend Christmas was when his mum let him open everything the night before, so he could spend the day at the movies, avoiding all the relatives that come over for Christmas dinner. He hated everything his mother cooked, and counted off to me the only 10 foods he would ever eat, hated everything else, and didn't even need to try it. Did I mention he was 27 years old? A few days later, he invites me out to coffee, and I agree so I can tell him I won't be going on any more dates with him. He was nice enough, and even though he was an oddball, we never got each other to laugh. All our conversations were dry, no shared interests, and he didn't have the same values on the importance of family, so this wasn't going to work. We meet up and he orders a meal while I get my coffee. I tell him that I enjoyed our dates, but I won't be seeing him again. He yells, "So you're breaking up with me?" No, we're not anything official. "I can't believe you're dumping me!" And he storms out, leaving his food behind half-eaten. I sit there for a few minutes kind of stunned, slightly amused, but okay, life goes on. A few weeks go by and now it's the holidays. I run into him again and this time we do hit it off. He seems to laugh easier, tells a good joke, etc. He asks what I'm doing for New Year's and I invite him to the party I was going to. I figure, hey, maybe we can at least be friends. I tell him about the other girls that will be there and he seems to get the hint that we aren't going as a couple. We get to the party and he loudly declares that he doesn't drink. That's fine, no one reacts, no biggie. He sits in the corner refusing to acknowledge anyone. He seems upset for some reason, so I ask him what's wrong. He's upset because the movie trivia we were playing earlier had a mistake in it. Alright, we'll get the info off the box and write to them. He seems to cheer up after this. Later he sneaks into the kitchen and begins to prepare himself a mixed drink by pouring a little of everything into a glass. He doesn't notice me and he's talking to himself going, "Yeah, a little of this, ooh, maybe some of that," and he takes a sip of his rum, cranberry, Malibu, Dr. Pepper, orange juice, mint schnapps with a splash of tap water, and pours the rest down the drain. I don't think he wanted to admit that he didn't know how alcohol worked. On the drive home the next morning, he pretended to have a hangover and didn't talk much. I'm driving and the roads are icy, so I'm not minding the silence. About 30 minutes left in the trip, and he asks me what I want to do with my college degree. I tell him my plans and stuff I'm excited to do. He then says, "I don't see the point of you wasting your time getting a degree. You'll just be spending the rest of your life raising my children and cooking me meals that I like." It took all I had not to dump him off right there on the freeway. He continues to say demeaning nonsense about our future, how he'll convince me to drop out of college, how pointless it is for all women to get degrees, blah, blah, blah. My ears begin ringing with rage. I've never had someone say anything so outrightly unsupportive or sexist like that to my face. I knew he had some strange social issues, maybe some anxiety about trying new things, but this was too much. I calmly told him I was not going to be told my lot in life is to raise his babies on his part-time Blockbuster paycheck. I didn't say another word to him, just dropped him off at his car and drove off. I did learn never to feel obligated to put up with someone's bullcrap. I kept giving him chances when I shouldn't have. But in the end, I think I needed to learn that lesson. Now I'm really careful about not leading men on, especially if they have poor social skills. There's been a few, but the absolute worst was the woman who turned up to the pub with literally no money, expecting me to buy her drinks and dinner. I wouldn't have minded if she had told me beforehand, but this was completely out of the blue. So anyway, we sat there making awkward conversation, or at least I tried to start a conversation, told her about my life, asked her questions. She was too busy texting and phoning her friends to really take notice. So eventually we did get talking, then out of nowhere she told me that she killed her dog. Not accidentally either. I just upped and left and avoided all contact. That was 2 years ago. Ah, the Irish goodbye, effective for parties, conversations with your racist grandparents, and antisocial dates who have killed and, for all we know, eaten their dogs. There are some worthwhile theories about this lady in the comments. She just wanted a free meal but didn't want a date.
Jenny, how do I get out of this date? Tell him you killed your dog, lol.
With dating, you have to avoid people who are just hungry. I had just gotten into college and was single, so I couldn't wait to meet some girls there. I sat next to a really cool girl in German class, very outdoorsy, went camping a lot, which is awesome. I do too. On the last night of a project we were working on together, I gathered the nerve to ask her out, and she quickly said, "Sure." I picked her up the next night, and we go to dinner. Everything is going great, had some good small talk, laughed quite a bit. Then the food arrives. She immediately pulls out a Bible from her purse and says we should recite a passage before eating. I'm an atheist, but I don't really mind if a person is religious. I refuse to judge anyone on that basis alone. So we recite a verse, thank the Lord for our meal, etc. As soon as I start eating, the first question she asks is, "Have you found a good church around here? I've been to a couple, but I don't really like them." I froze like a deer in the headlights. I've never been to church in my entire life, so I have no clue as to what she would think is a good church. After contemplating what to say for a second, I decide to just tell her I'm an atheist. I mean, heck, I don't care that she's religious and said a Bible verse or prayer before the meal, so maybe she won't care that I'm an atheist, right? Not even close. She gives me this weird, evil, astonished look, immediately grabs her Bible, flips through it for a second, and starts quoting a passage about sinners going to hell. I knew I should have gotten up and left right away, but I have an entire steak I just paid $25 for sitting in front of me. I hurry up and down the steak, potatoes, and vegetables in about 10 minutes. During these 10 minutes, she's still reciting passages, talking about how I'm going to hell. I just nodded and continued inhaling my food. Pulled out a piece of paper with about 5 cab companies' phone numbers on it, grabbed about $75, threw it on the table. The only thing I said to her was, "That should be plenty of money to pay for dinner and get you a cab home." The next day, she texted me and sort of apologized. By sort of, I mean the text read something like, "I didn't mean to offend you, but you need to recant your sins or spend eternity in hell." Next day, I'm off to German class, wondering what may happen when I see her. Oddly enough, she wasn't there. Next day comes and not there again. I asked the professor if she had received word as to why she hadn't shown up, and the teacher told me that she had dropped the class the day before. That was a relief. Now fast forward 4 years, and I'm a senior at a random bar near campus. And guess who is there drunk out of her mind? Yep, it's the good old religious girl. I try to stay away from her, but she spots me, runs up to me, and hugs me, which I find very strange. I don't hold grudges, so I hug her back. She buys me a drink I didn't ask for, but I accept because I'm fairly broke. She damn near demands I drink it with her, so whatever, I'll do it. I try to be a nice guy from time to time. Not more than 10 minutes later, she says, "We should go back to my place and hang out," while rubbing her hand up my thigh. I turn around, point to my girlfriend and say, "See her? That's my girlfriend, and she has never cared that I'm an atheist. Thanks for the drink." Walked away and never saw her again. In summary, religious girl claims I'm going to hell for being an atheist on our first date. 4 years later, she's drunk at a bar, trying to take me home with her for adult fun times.
Make-A-Wish recipients and workers, what were some wishes you had to say no to? Make-A-Wish wish granter here, and I have to say it is the ultimate sadness when we have to stop the process because a non-custodial parent won't sign the paperwork. It's happened far too often. Usually the wishes we had to say no to were from the kids' family members. There was always some uncle, grandma, cousin, sibling, or parent who wanted to hijack the kid's wish. A classmate of mine, now passed, got a meet and greet with Sammy Sosa. The understanding from the Make-A-Wish people was that Sammy would sign autographs and sit with the family for a while. Now, this kid was all about Sammy. He had his jerseys, loved Sammy's little leaps after home runs, and if I recall correctly, even was big into Pepsi because of Sammy too. When the day came, Sammy showed up late. He didn't respond when the family greeted him. It was described as a sullen silence, signed a glove, and then walked away. My classmates started crying once it was clear Sammy was not going to come back. Right when the parents were about to leave, another baseball player named Corey Patterson saw my classmate, came up, signed everything they had, and talked and joked around with the family for over a half hour. Corey became my classmate's favorite player that day, and I think he lived perhaps a year after that moment. At his funeral, my classmate's picture with Corey was one of the prominent pictures. That moment and day truly, truly meant the world to him. He was around 10 to 11, if I recall correctly. To this day, I'm unsure if someone from Make-A-Wish found Corey or if the moment was as spontaneous as it was described to me, but no matter what, Corey will always have a special place in my heart because of that story. I, of course, was not there, and I'm not a primary source for Sammy's interactions with my classmate, but I know and trust the family. One thing that a couple of Anons have pointed out that I think is worth mentioning is that it seems unlikely that Make-A-Wish would organize a meet and greet with Sammy Sosa, gently suggesting I was misremembering the context. The Anons argued that it's more likely their meet and greet would be with the Cubs team as a whole, and that this changes the context of Sammy's actions if the meet and greet wasn't directly with him. What I do remember is that this story really rocked our tight-knit community, but made us that much more appreciative of Corey Patterson. My little brother has had 2 heart transplants so far, and will probably get another one before it's all said and done. His wish was to go to Nintendo. Well, Nintendo Japan doesn't grant wishes, but Nintendo of America does. He stayed in Seattle for a few days and had a day-long tour of Nintendo. Unfortunately, Reggie wasn't in the office that day, but the Treehouse staff led him around all day. This was right before the Switch came out, so we got to play Breath of the Wild before anyone. They gave him a sweet goodie bag and let him go on a shopping spree in the employee store. I received a wish when I was 15. At the time, I was madly in love with Harry Styles and of course wanted to use my wish to meet him and spend the day with him. After telling the wish coordinator this, she broke the news to me that if I were to meet him, it will be a year from then, with about 15 other kids for a very brief moment, a hello and a photo. Upon hearing that disappointing news, I changed my wish and instead went to Australia for 10 days with my family and swam in the Great Barrier Reef. Just for some background, both my sister and I are pretty dang sick, and so we had the rare occasion where we both got wishes. My family suggested that we just do one, but Make-A-Wish was adamant that we each got our own. My sister's Make-A-Wish was to meet Taylor Swift. We flew to Nebraska for 2 days, got in the same meet and greet line as people who won radio contests, took a picture with Taylor Swift, and that was that. I, on the other hand, asked to meet Christopher Nolan. He had never been requested for a wish, so we were flown to LA where we got a tour of the Warner Brothers lot and then had a private lunch with Nolan and Emma Thomas, his wife. We hung out for 2 hours where they finally left because they had some film-related thing to do. We found out later that he'd only agreed to an hour, but during the lunch insisted that he stayed longer. It was quite interesting how we both had celebrity wishes and they both turned out so differently. I asked for a shotgun because I was into clay shooting. They said no. Went for a rally driving day. They picked my family and I up in a limo. Drove us 2 hours to the place, and then I had the whole place to myself and lots of time behind the wheel. It was great. They paid for pro pictures and a meal after for my family and my godparents' family. Even just gave me some spending money. I had a great time. 10 years later, still alive. And hopefully have that shotgun? This isn't my personal story, but one of my uncle who passed away shortly after I was born. He loved the Terminator so much that he wanted nothing more than to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. Due to having a busy schedule, Arnold's agent had to deny him of his wish a couple of times, was filming for the second Terminator. My uncle was so determined to meet Arnold that he then changed his wish to meeting Maria Shriver, Arnold's wife. Because of his determination, he was allowed on set of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. He got to meet Arnold, Maria, and Arnold's stunt double. My mom still has the pictures and it makes my heart sore. Make-A-Wish is fantastic and I'm so glad my uncle got to live out his dream. My condition prevented international travel, so even though my top wishes were to go to Japan or to the UK to meet J.K. Rowling, those were denied. I ended up doing a shopping spree at Mall of America, which sounds kind of lame, but I grew up poor and had a lot of fun being able to just buy things for myself without worrying. First thing I bought was a new pair of glasses, since my old ones were scratched to crap and too weak anyway. When I was in college, I had a good friend named John. We were both in automotive 8 hours a day for 2 years. One day, we grabbed sushi on lunch, and he casually mentioned at 12 years old, current age 20, he was a recipient of Make-A-Wish. He asked for sushi and just sushi. You could see his eyes light up just telling the story. They set him up with a private lunch at a local sushi bar where he had the entire selection of sushi rolls laid out in front of him with each and every possible condiment, roll, and side. Not an expensive or grandeur request, but Make-A-Wish went above and beyond. I've been the recipient, and later on after my health improved, I volunteered as a wish coordinator. My original wish was to attend the Oscars. That got denied by the Academy as they do not grant wishes. I wound up going to the People's Choice Awards as a VIP. Make-A-Wish flew my family to LA for a week, all expenses paid. They got us a limo for the show, paid for my dress, hair, and makeup, we walked the red carpet, and were seated very close to the stage. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The generosity of the volunteers is remarkable. They even had someone greet us at the airport on arrival. It was extremely important to me that my brother and sister were included in my wish because my illness had robbed them of part of their childhoods. I am forever indebted to everyone who made my wish possible. When I turned 18, I decided to volunteer as a wish coordinator to give back to an organization that did so much for me. I met with wish kids and their families. We would always arrive with a gift for all of the children of the family based on a little survey they filled out. We'd talk with the child and help define their wish. It's important to determine the child's true wish and make sure that it isn't influenced by parents. The most common wish is to go to Disney. Celebrity meet and greets are the ones that often can be turned down. First, because it's undefined what a meet and greet is. It could be the child literally waving at someone and no one wants that. And second, because not all celebrities grant wishes or can schedule time to meet wish kids. The coolest wish I worked on was a shopping spree for a boy who was confined to his room. He got $7,000 to go buy video games, TVs, a tricked-out lazy boy, etc. for the ultimate gaming setup. I worked with a guy who was a Make-A-Wish kid, and he said he wished for a puppy and was denied. It makes sense that they're not going to give live animals to a little kid. Well, it's between that and the shotgun. When I was a baby until I was 5, I had cancer and got some wishes. My first wish was for a computer. I only wanted a computer because it came with a mouse. Yes, I thought it came with a real mouse. So, obviously it was rejected because you can't have pets when you basically live in a hospital and my family is broke anyway, so they couldn't give us a pet. I ended up getting some dope googly eye glasses and an epic trip to Disney World. It was the only family vacation we ever got to go on. I didn't know the kid at all, but he died from cancer his senior year of high school when I was a sophomore. We had an assembly for him. His name was Tyler. His wish was a gift to his best friend. Tyler went to a computer store with his friend and asked him to show him the best computer there. Then Tyler bought the best computer there for his friend using Make-A-Wish donation money, only to die a little later. Such a selfless guy. Tyler met Imagine Dragons 3 years before his death and they became friends. Imagine Dragons dedicated It's Time to Tyler. Whenever I hear that song, I think of this. It chokes me up every time. I worked for Make-A-Wish, Junior Genie as I like to say. We had to say no to wishes all the time. Either the person the kid wanted to meet didn't grant wishes, the place they wanted to go to didn't grant wishes, their wish was ridiculously expensive or prohibitive, their doctor didn't sign off on the wish as it wasn't a good idea for their health, and so on. For the most part, our volunteers were pretty good at helping kids zero in on that perfect wish. I've helped coordinate some wishes that I was surprised to see were approved. Usually it's trips to far distances with a lot of stops and long stays. It's one thing to go to Japan. It's another to go to Japan for 2 weeks. It's another to go to Japan for 2 weeks and go to 10 different attractions. Not all of them give us free tickets. Many don't even give discounts. Most kids had cookie-cutter wishes. Disney World, Paris, Meet the President, etc. Those were my bread and butter. I hate to call them cookie-cutter because I know it's such a precious memory for the kid and their family. Working there was a precious memory for me too. And I enjoyed coordinating everyone's trips. Unusual, frequent, high medical needs, lots of family, what have you. It was such an amazing thing to be a part of. I knew a friend who had cancer and overcame it, and he talked about Make-A-Wish. If it's not accepted, you apparently get a first-class trip to Disney World most people can't afford. He said he went to Disney World because he wanted to meet a skater that was in Europe on some tour. I was really lucky to have my Make-A-Wish granted, and I just want to say they really go above and beyond. My mom has always talked about going to Hawaii, and we knew it was pretty unrealistic for a family of 4. I was pretty young when I made my wish, so I didn't even know all that Hawaii had to offer, but I chose to go there for my wish. They put us up in a penthouse suite on Waikiki Beach, and I've never experienced anything more special in my life. Everything and everyone there wanted to make sure my family had an unforgettable time, and we sure did. We were able to forget about the cancer for a little while and feel like a normal family again. Thank you so much to Make-A-Wish and all that contribute. I have experience with Make-A-Wish in the last year due to my son's condition. This was a question I asked, and the response I was given was they will do anything they can within reason. One kid wanted a swimming pool in his backyard, and they did that. Because of how the process goes with Make-A-Wish, they ask the kid a lot of questions to determine what the child wants and to ensure there isn't any influence from the parents. My wife and I sat with my son while they asked him a lot of questions over about a 1-hour period to determine what he wanted to do. They asked my wife and I to sit there silently while he answered honestly. We are going to go to Legoland and meet Darth Vader sometime in 2019. I was a Make-A-Wish kid around 20 years ago. I was 5. I asked to be turned into a dinosaur. They said no. 0 out of 10, worst organization, they hate kids, boo. A couple of years ago, I went to Disney at Orlando, and there was a little boy running around wearing a shirt that said, "I'm a Make-A-Wish kid." My friend had to comfort me when I cried because the toddler's mom and aunt told the pretzel vendor his Make-A-Wish was originally, "Make mommy happy." I got genuinely emotional reading that, and I'm so glad I'm not crying on mic right now. The moment I met with the workers, I asked to go to the moon, but was turned down. Tried to compromise with space in general, ended up going to Italy. Not as cool. One of my nieces is a Make-A-Wish recipient. She had stage 4 rhabdomyosarcoma. They flew her, her sisters, her dad, and her grandma to Disney World, and they had the time of their lives. She's 6 years cancer-free and still talks about how grateful she was for that trip. She's just turned 14, and her younger sister talks about how it was her only plane ride ever. That organization is amazing and will forever have all of our support. I would like to add that the Ronald McDonald House Charities is another amazing organization that put my family up for housing in Manhattan during her treatment, over 2 years in the hospital at a minimal cost. Before that, we were driving 3 hours each way every time she needed chemo. Also, shout out to the Sloan Kettering Oncology Ward for taking care of her and making her feel like a kid while she was going through treatment. I think we all know by now the comedian who had a kid request he show up to the child's funeral dressed as a giant member. Kid made it through his illness. The comedian is named Russell Howard, and I gotta say, laughter is the best medicine. My son chose a Disney cruise. He didn't even hesitate in his pick. Probably because we were on day one of a Disney cruise we had been planning for over a year when he took a small tumble in our stateroom and wound up breaking his femur. Because, unbeknownst to us, his leg was filled with Ewing sarcoma. This trip he had been looking forward to for so long was destroyed before it even really started. So when it was wish time, he asked for a redo of our cruise. We waited until he had been off of chemo for a couple of months, and we had a wonderful time. We even added days on at Disney World from our DVC timeshare after the cruise. Both the Make-A-Wish folks and the Disney cruise employees told my son to make sure he wore his Make-A-Wish shirt to the parks when we were there. He did one of the days, and even though that wasn't part of his wish, the Disney cast members all treated him great. It was so nice to see him have such a wonderful trip after a ruined dream vacation and a year of non-stop hospital stays. By the way, he is doing great now. He hit 2 years off chemo this past September. I got a wish as a kid, then survived. The biggest, best thing I could think of was to go to Chuck E. Cheese's. I have no idea why I was fixated on that. To the credit of some good peeps, to Chuck E. Cheese's I went. I couldn't be around other people, so they opened it up at night. People deep cleaned it, sterilizing each ball in the ball pit. There was dedication there. Then someone who was cleared medically worked it. Don't remember most of it, was pretty young, mostly just remember the bits I found exciting, but that dang rat casino still makes me smile whenever I see one. Moral of the story, never bet against Make-A-Wish when dealing with logistics. Every ball in pit. Kid I know got cancer in elementary school. He was always into history and US presidents, so we asked to meet him. They flew his whole family out to DC to meet George W. Bush. Also, he actually spent more time with them than was allotted in his daily planner according to the dad. The kid beat cancer and is still doing okay. Not a recipient, but worked at a Hard Rock Cafe. A Wish kid's wish was to see Paul McCartney live, so they came in to eat dinner before his concert down the road from the restaurant. We sat him next to some signed Beatles guitars and sheets of lyrics and the such. As an avid Beatles fan myself, I was able to serve them. I sat and talked with that 6-year-old about the Beatles for a good hour, played all the Beatles songs, and had their music videos playing on the TVs throughout the restaurant. It was super humbling with how excited this kid was to go see Paul, and just be able to be outside the hospital for the night. And also super heartbreaking seeing his dad's face the whole dinner. I've never seen such pain, and I think about him frequently. I'm from Minnesota. When I had leukemia 30 years ago, I remember my wish was to go to the Grand Canyon. My parents straight up vetoed me. And instead the family, 2 sisters, went to Disney World and other Orlando attractions through the Give Kids the World program. It was the right decision, but still. Was it the right decision? Because it sounds to me like Disney World is full of more Make-A-Wish kids than actual people. Also, the Make-A-Wish Foundation should have let you have your wish in spite of your parents. That's the whole reason they have those conversations with you. I got offered a Make-A-Wish when I was 5 years old because I had leukemia. My parents declined their offer because my survival rate was very, very likely, and they wanted another kid who was less likely to survive have it. After I was cured, they took me and my twin brother to Disneyland to celebrate using their own money. My parents are wonderful people. In this thread, wish denied, went to Disney. My son was a Make-A-Wish recipient. He wanted to go to Europe. They were planning it, and his piece of crap birth father wouldn't allow my kids to get passports. Great father, huh? Son had like 36% chance of survival from brain cancer, and he said no passports. Anyways, his second wish was an RV trip to the Badlands, Yellowstone, and the Rockies. They got us the biggest bus type, think it's A-class, RV they could get. Set everything up for us, gave us itineraries, and off we went. It's such an incredible organization, and luckily, my son had a blast after finally having the okay to go. He's also in remission and doing well, thank God. Make-A-Wish is incredible. Fun fact, the amount of kids that wish to go to Disney World is so large that Disney built its own resort for them called Give Kids the World, where only families from Make-A-Wish can stay. They have special buses to transport them, doctors are always on staff, and there's special games and activities at the resort for kids who can't make it to the park that day. I adore Make-A-Wish and everything it's done for kids. It helped send my friend to the Bahamas when she was sick, and she said it was one of the best experiences of her life. It was mentioned several times below, but Give Kids the World was actually made by Henry Landworth, a Holocaust survivor. My daughter was granted a wish. She really wanted to meet Taylor Swift and see her in concert, but Taylor was not touring at the time, so we, her parents, kiboshed that wish. She was not healthy enough to enjoy a long concert, and I didn't want her to postpone her wish since we weren't sure if or how long she might live. In the end, she chose to go to the SeaWorld Resort in Florida and swim with the dolphins. She ended up being scared to death of them and refused to even go in the water. Make-A-Wish sent us to Universal while we were there too, and she had fun. That was 6 years ago, and she is now in remission. We took her to a Taylor Swift concert this last summer, and I think she enjoyed it way more than she would have 6 years ago. So when I was 15, I got to make a wish. My uncle really pushed to ask to meet Tiger Woods and play golf with him. I wasn't into that. Neither were my cervical tumors. I was getting better, and I knew I was going to be okay. I told the wish peeps that I wanted to bow out, but they were pushy. Right in front of my mom, I said I wanted to hit a blunt with Snoop Dogg and wouldn't accept any other wish. That got shut down. I'm fine and 34 now. We did the standard Disney World trip. My son only had months to live, and we had a small window when he was well enough to go. Bruce was 5, so he didn't really have any big or creative ideas. He'd only been to Disney World once for a single day, and my husband wasn't able to come. He told the wish grantees that he wanted to show Daddy the giant castle and ride roller coasters with no lines. Even though it seemed like the cookie-cutter wish, my son's Make-A-Wish experience was truly amazing. I still cry thinking about how much that trio meant to him and our entire family. My son was treated like absolute royalty during the entire trip. Volunteers we met at Give Kids the World, the resort where we stayed, really connected with him, and even flew in from states away when he was on hospice and for his funeral. I love reading about the amazing and unique experiences that others request. I will definitely be following this post. We became so close with our wish granters. Those people are truly angels in this earth. I am so thankful to everyone involved in Make-A-Wish, donors, volunteers, everyone. This organization made such a huge impact on our lives, and we made memories that our family will cherish forever. This doesn't answer your question, but I had cancer when I was 3 and apparently have been approached by Make-A-Wish. Unfortunately, I was only 3 and too young to actually make a reasonable wish, so the wish fell to my parents. They asked for furniture. Furniture! I'm told that I was very sarcastic, even at a young age. When they told me I could wish for whatever I wanted, I thought I could think of something impossible. A big brick house, so the big bad wolf can't blow it down. Make-A-Wish people said that they ran out of bricks granting their last wish. They handed me a catalog of playhouses to choose from. I defiantly flipped immediately to the back and poked one at random before probably returning to my Studio Ghibli movie. And that is the story of how Make-A-Wish built me a 2-story playhouse with heating, air, and electricity. I'm so glad they ran out of bricks. My mom became a wish granter shortly after my son went on his Make-A-Wish trip. She's done many wishes and has even been wish granter of the year for her region a couple times. The only one that was a flat-out no was one recipient who asked for a sexual favor. Other than that, wishes for new cars are always a no, but Make-A-Wish will basically pimp out a car already owned by the recipient. Other than that, she's been a wish granter for everything from trips to shopping sprees to even being on an episode of Fixer Upper where she was wish granter for 2 boys who wanted an accessible playground in their backyard. I got to have mine granted in 1999 when I was 8. I wanted to see my 2 favorite baseball players, Mark McGwire and Chipper Jones, play. Make-A-Wish set up everything: hotel, tickets to the game for my whole family, and even tickets to Six Flags. Before the first game, they brought us down for batting practice. Got to meet the whole Braves lineup. Didn't meet a single player from the Cardinals, and we were told McGwire specifically declined the request. Braves won that game. I feel karma paid off too. Braves made it to the World Series, Chipper won MVP, and is now a Hall of Famer. McGwire would later get marked for using steroids, will not make the Hall of Fame, and Cardinals finished under 500. My mom worked for Make-A-Wish. A little kid wanted to build a treehouse in his front yard. Make-A-Wish denied him for being too hard to coordinate. Make-A-Wish must not have approached the right people. I've been in construction for a long time. I could get about 30 qualified people together on short notice to build a treehouse for a terminally ill kid in a weekend or so. Shout out to Ron Swanson's old man on Reddit for that comment. Username checks out.
What's the most entitled behavior you've seen from a passenger on an airline? Every so often we get the odd straggler who boards last, who finds a vacant seat in first or business, thinking that we won't know that they're from coach. Excuse me, sir, I might need to see your boarding pass. Sorry, your seat is 58A, not 1A. But I'm so tall, I need the legroom. Awkward silence. I saw this being given as advice on Twitter recently. This freelance guy who travels a lot decided to share his pro tips for long flights. A lot of it was just about seat posture and stretching and such, but then one tip was to always be the last person on the plane so you have your choice of open seat. Yeah, no, that's a great way to have nowhere for your bags and still get the same seat you were assigned. My girlfriend's mum is a flight attendant. One time, a woman got quite angry because her daughter spilled apple juice all over and there was not a clothes dryer on the plane for her daughter's sweater. Not an attendant, but was on a flight with really bad turbulence. It went on for about 10 minutes, then the old lady next to me reaches up and presses her button. The attendant walked over to see if the woman was okay, and the woman began to yell at the attendant for the rough flight, and that she'd been flying her whole life and clearly the pilot has no idea what he's doing. The stewardess just walked away. Once got stranded at Newark for 22 hours after our flight had an unfixable fault and was cancelled late at night. We got put up in a hotel, but understandably by the time the new flight rolled around, earliest they could fit in a new flight, everyone was quite tired and agitated. As we were waiting to board the new flight, the flight attendant announces they would be boarding people with additional needs and families with young children first, followed by first class, then premium economy, etc. All the pretty standard stuff. Obviously, it can take a bit longer for people in wheelchairs to board, so it makes sense for them to go first. It's common on most airlines, I believe. Anyway, this business dude races to the front of the crowd and starts yelling at an attendant, saying it was already disgusting that he had lost a day due to their incompetence, and now he had to wait even longer despite being a first-class passenger and paying big bucks every year to fly with them. The worst part was he was looking at the others in the crowd to back him up. Like it was perfectly reasonable to scream at this woman who, like us, had also been stranded and most likely had had very little sleep and was doing her best to do her job in this difficult situation. But she was awesome. Without missing a beat, she smiled and nodded and said, "Okay, sir," then made a big point of leaning into her mic and telling the waiting line of people in wheelchairs and mothers with babies that this gentleman needed to board before them and could they please wait. Literally every single person at the gate is looking at this guy with disgust on his face as he tries to backtrack and says he doesn't mind waiting for the first group, but the attendant says, No, you've made yourself quite clear, let's get you boarded and the others will have to wait. He's humiliated as he sheepishly walks by. She handled it perfectly. Frick yes, stewardess, frick yes. In what universe do you think I'm the good guy for saying this kind of thing? Also, this is not going to get him into the destination any quicker. The only thing he's speeding up is the transition between his airport chair and the chair on the plane. Not one specific passenger, but a type of behavior I've unfortunately seen too much of. A couple will book separate seats, the man in premium economy seat with extra legroom, and the woman in a normal economy seat. The woman will then play the sad sack and ask another passenger to give up their comfy seat so they can sit together. If the other passenger refuses, usually because they paid extra and don't fit a regular seat, some will even complain to the crew to make them move the other passenger. All of this to save a few bucks on the second premium seat. Seeing as a lot of people asked, no, crew don't move passengers because they're sitting next to someone else's spouse, and certainly not from a premium economy seat. This drives me insane. I once had a man get very heated because he was on the plane with his wife and 4 children and did not pre-select seats. And he wanted me to switch my window seat for a middle seat in a different row so his family could all be together. But I paid extra to pre-select my window seat. It was only like $15, but why should I have to give up what I paid for just because you wanted to save money and assumed others would rearrange themselves for you and your family? The flight attendant sided with me and the 6'4" guy who was in the aisle seat of my row, who also didn't want to move and was much more assertive than me, and the family was spread throughout the cabin. Mid-90s, there was this kid in customs, Toronto to Houston flight, who was going nuts. He was driving people crazy in the departure area. On the flight, he had a full-sized metal Tonka truck that he was running up and down the aisle with. He smacked me on the head and nearly hit my mum in front of me. I grabbed it before he could hit my very frail and on blood thinner's mum and gave it to a crew member who refused to give it back to the family. The family refused to seat him until it was announced that there would be no food or beverage service until the aisle was cleared. Another woman grabbed the kid and returned him to his family. They let him run loose again as soon as the service was over. Finally, someone from the cockpit had to come back and tell the family we couldn't start the landing approach until the brat was in his seat. They put him in his seat, screaming bloody murder the whole time. As soon as descent started, they let him up and he was running up and down the aisle as we landed. The family was so dense that when the captain ordered everyone to stay in their damn seats and that only families with small children would be allowed to deplane first, they smirked their way down the aisle. My mum walked with a cane and the crush getting off was hard for her. Since we were home, we just waited till the aisles were clear. When we got off, you could hear the kids screaming halfway down the jetway. A police officer was holding him and the rest of the family, I'm guessing mum, dad, and 2 grandparents, were all in handcuffs. I once watched a very well-dressed businessman have an epic toddler-level tantrum at a check-in counter when he was advised that his flight was delayed due to fog. He literally screamed and jumped up and down and demanded that the airline better do something about it or else. The guy working behind the counter just smirked and suggested that the business guy was welcome to go outside and try to flap the fog away with his arms. The entire queue burst out laughing. I was on a plane at the Burbank airport and a family that was on standby boarded the plane without being told that they'd be on the flight. They proceeded to go passenger to passenger trying to get people to deboard the plane so they can use their standby tickets. They argued with the flight attendants. It was at least 45 minutes of us sitting on a plane on a runway listening to this family of buttholes argue about how they need to be on this flight because they have somewhere to go. I was on my way home from Vegas and was hungover, and I don't think I've ever wanted to punch someone more than I did in that moment. A few years back, I had a 7-hour flight and a kid was sitting behind me who kept kicking the seat. I decided to just wait, maybe he'll eventually stop. Nope. It went on for about an hour until I couldn't take it anymore. 10 years of my regular flying, and this was the first time I called and complained to an air hostess. She apologized to me and asked the family behind me to keep it down. They just stared at her and did nothing. The moment she turned away, the little craphead started kicking against me again, and I couldn't take it anymore and turned back and said loudly to the family, "Could you please make him stop doing that?" The father, I presume, said sorry and still did nothing. The kid kept on, so finally I called the flight attendant and asked her if there was any other seat available because they're not listening or have no common decency, pointing to the family behind me. She came back after a few minutes and proceeded to take me to the first class. My first experience in the luxury section. The worst thing was she kept apologizing to me and I kept asking her to stop and that it wasn't her fault. It was just weird. Also, F those butthole families. I'm not sure this would happen these days. I feel like airlines have got tighter about letting people just move into the champagne and caviar zone. Please, if you have any modern-day accounts of this happening, share them in the comments below. I was a kid flying out to Utah to start my teen tour. About halfway through the flight, departing out of New York, the captain got on the speaker to announce an engine had failed and we needed to make an emergency landing in Chicago. Needless to say, we got a little concerned. Except for one passenger who stormed up to the flight attendant and explained she was a nanny and needed to get to Utah to attend to the children she took care of. I'm not exactly sure what she was hoping for, that the pilot, upon hearing a babysitter was on board, would risk the lives of everyone else to fly us all through, or that the flight attendant would be so moved by this story that she would climb out on the wing and repair the engine mid-flight. Alas, there was no emergency jetpack to give this passenger to blast away from the plane to get to Utah on time, and she was told to sit down. Was on a Vegas to Boston flight when a passenger passed away in his sleep. The whole situation was heartbreaking and the flight attendants were clearly shaken. We stopped in New York for emergency personnel to attend to him. The whole process was very quick and the pilot and staff handled it like champs. Just as we were about to take off, the guy in the front row asks the attendant if we'd all get free drinks due to the inconvenience. I've never wanted to yell at a stranger so much in my life. The next day I got an email from the airline with a $50 voucher to apologize. I didn't want it nor expect it and wondered if it happened because some idiot complained about the diversion. I did tweet the airline to compliment the staff on their handling of the situation. They deserved it. I didn't say what the situation was, just the flight number. I figured they'd figure it out. Flight attendant: "Can you please open your blind all the way? It's regulation for landing." Passenger: "No, I want it closed." This goes on for a minute. Passenger is using his tone to assert that he refuses to open it. Flight attendant speedwalks to the handset and her voice comes on over the PA. "Hello, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to play some trivia today. The question is, why do we keep the blinds open during takeoff and landing?" And without letting anyone answer, she jumps right into, "It's so that we can all keep an eye on the outside of the plane for safety." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I fly a lot and I was on one of those planes where half the plane were ignoring the rules and stuff. When we touched down, these people immediately got up, walking around and taking their bags out of the overheads. Mind you, the plane hasn't parked. It's literally just touched the ground on the landing strip, so it's still moving, and it's dangerous for half the people on the plane to be messing around. And even worse, taking all their heavy bags down around everyone else's heads. The flight attendants are now desperately trying to get these people to sit down until the plane stops moving, and some people were waving their hands at them dismissively. I think the captain heard the commotion and the flight attendant half yelling, because all of a sudden the plane did a very abrupt stop, which knocked over all the people standing up and then continued on its way to park. The flight attendant then said, "This is exactly why we have rules." Yeah, all those people stood up and looked real sheepish. I remember being an unruly little kid who wouldn't put my seatbelt on in the car, so my mother would just slam on the brakes, making my face hit the seat, and this is exactly how I imagine the situation you just described. I had someone have a meltdown because I had to have them properly stow their wedding dress. The thing was massive and spilling into the aisle, blocking seats of the entire row. They may have had to pay the hotel to get the wrinkles out, but I likely saved them from shoe prints and beverage cart rollers going back and forth over it. Still, she was in tears and I was not going to risk others' safety, including my own. My future sister-in-law brought a ticket for her dress to fly in a seat for her wedding. She of course went through the correct steps to do this, called the airline to see if she could even do that, got a gate pass for it, had to go through the metal and body line for TSA and it counted as her carry-on. Had to pick up a special boarding pass, early boarding, and it got the window seat so no one could trip over it in an emergency. If Southwest had said no, she couldn't do it, then she would have just driven her dress, but everyone was super accommodating and even gave all of us a bottle of champagne to celebrate. We did share the bottles with another wedding party that was flying out who didn't get the special treatment. My mum was a flight attendant in her 20s. I asked her for a story. Her first week flying, there was a group of drunk men on the flight. At one point, when returning to quiet them down again, one of the fellows had his Johnson out on full display for all, in its flaccid glory. She says to him very politely and a bit taken aback, "Why don't you put that away now?" And this drunken man flat out says to her, "Why don't you put it away for me?" with the most revolting smug smile on his face. My mum says, in her exact words, "I'd be happy to do that for you, but you'd never be able to use it again." My mum has always had the most ridiculous stories that always turn out to be true, and I'll take her word for this one. Threatening castration on a paying customer is in this case completely justified. If they're exposing themselves on a plane, I feel, let's get that written up in all the airplane's handbooks. I was on a flight from New York City to Portland International Airport. Only empty seat was next to me, a middle seat. Bulkhead, but the kind where there isn't a wall, just the first-class seats in front of us. Door is about to close when a large, sweaty man comes running into the plane to claim the empty seat. He was carrying a full-size pizza box. All the overhead bins were already closed and full, but that didn't stop him proceeding to open them to find a place to stash his pizza. The stewardess kindly informed him that he couldn't put his pizza in an overhead bin. "But it'll get stepped on," he gruffly informs her. She proceeded to tell him to take his seat and put the pizza in front of him. He told her that he flies with pizza all the time and has never been treated this way. He persisted, but as their argument was getting pretty heated, he finally succumbed and put the pizza under the seat in front of him and sat down. The stewardesses have now started the safety, video, and demonstration, and he pulls out a flip phone and proceeds to make a call. I can tell he's going through menus, so I'm thinking he's calling Delta to complain. Nope, turns out to be his landline phone company. He had been late paying his bill and was trying to get them to waive the late fee. They wouldn't. He's arguing with them. Plane has pushed back from the gate and is headed toward the runway at this point. Stewardess comes over and tells him he needs to put his phone away now. He motions with his hand to say 1 minute. "No sir, it needs to be put away now." He flips it shut dramatically mid-sentence and puts it in his pocket. Stewardess is back at the front of the plane. He then decides to stretch. I'm pretty much plastered to the wall as he tries to stay out of his way as he extends his arms up and then to the side, etc., and then twists in his seat back and forth, clearly agitated. He then extends his arms up, stretches out his fingers, and proceeds to crack his knuckles very expressively, one at a time. Sort of like a primary school bully would do on the playground before they were going to kick your butt. In that whole knuckle-cracking process, he flips a middle finger toward the flight attendant. I didn't notice her reaction as I was just waiting to get the 6-hour flight underway and over with. Next thing I know, I can tell we're pulling back to the gate. Flight attendants prepare for arrival and cross-check. Message. Door opens, cockpit door opens, captain comes to our row. "Sir, I understand you are harassing my flight attendant. I need you to leave the plane now." The pizza man attempted to argue and even ask me and other neighboring passengers if we had witnessed anything. Clearly the pilot wasn't budging on his decision, so the guy got his pizza off the floor and left the plane. Door closed and we departed. Empty seat next to me. A dozen years ago, I flew from Chicago to Israel. Very long flight with a stop in the middle, with a woman who didn't seem to understand that everyone around her was in the same situation she was in. She dropped a number of passive-aggressive gems over the course of our day together, but the worst one was right when we were being seated for the first leg. The plane was one of those 3-seat, 5-seat, 3-seat setups with aisles on each side of the 5-seat section, and this woman was seated in the middle of the 5-seat section. "But you can't seat me in the middle. What if I need to get up and walk around and the people next to me are asleep? I'll be very uncomfortable for this the whole flight." Wow, lady, you figured out why flying kind of sucks all by yourself. Now sit down and start pretending you're not here like the rest of us. Currently a flight attendant flying 5 years for a legacy carrier. I have a few that pop into my head. One was that I was working a quick turn at the end of a 3-dayer, and we had a medical emergency in first class where a passenger passed out. We had to give him CPR and hook him up on an AED. So 2 of us were with the man and the other flight attendant was paging a doctor and communicating with the captain. While this was going on, a passenger in the first row of the main cabin, who can clearly see everything going on, kept paging for a Coke and getting very upset that we wouldn't serve him. Finally, a commuting flight attendant stepped in for us and had a word with him. Another one was actually my last trip, when a woman who boarded towards the end, sitting in row 10A, who left her bag in the aisle blocking everyone else trying to get on, because she was looking for a place for her bag. She found a spot towards the back, and put her hand in the air and started snapping and hollering at me to get her bag for her. I went up to her and told her to get her bag out of the aisle. She got in my face and demanded that I needed to put it up, to which I answered that I couldn't lift her bag for her and she threw a fit. Finally, a nice gentleman helped her. Anyway, after boarding, she accused me of stealing her first scarf. I didn't. Then she called me a blonde B-word. She was removed. I had a lady another time get mad at me because I wouldn't give her my personal food I brought from home and paid for with my own money. She said she was hungry and she needed it. Nope. Another flight, I had a man and his small kid on a flight, and he, during boarding, asked me for one of the first-class meals I was preparing, and I asked him where he was sitting. Once he said a row in main cabin, I told him, "I'm sorry, these are for first class, but we have food for purchase in main cabin." He then told me his kid was hungry and demanded we give him free food. I kept saying, "I'm sorry, but the food is for purchase." He didn't think it was fair that he had to pay for food because he had a hungry kid. The seat switch scam has happened to me more times than it should have. I'm a college student and thus naturally people, especially couples with babies, think it would be much easier to force me into switching. There was this one time I was on a really long flight from Chicago to India. I usually never haggle much about a seat and I'm pretty cool about switching if people ask me for it. I have this crappy quality of trying to avoid conflict in any way possible. This time I was fortunate enough to get one of those front seats with a lot of legroom. I knew this seemed too good to be true, and at any moment a couple with a baby would request for the seat, to which I will cave. Needless to say, minutes later, this couple came up to me, with the flight attendant, asking me to switch because they had a baby and the father was sitting next to me. The mother had a middle seat way back in the plane for a very long flight. Although I was hesitant, but with 3 people awkwardly waiting on me to say yes, I eventually caved. As I was moving my stuff, one of my small empty plastic bottles fell from my bag and nearly hit the father. Now, you have to understand that this was one of those light plastic water bottles that could barely hurt if you tried to hit someone with it, let alone when it falls from the bag. But for some reason, that angered the father into believing that it could have somehow seriously injured their baby. Even after apologizing to him for a solid minute, he kept shouting at me about how careless I was and that I needed to learn plane etiquette. That just did it for me. I told him that I was no longer comfortable with the switch and just went back to my seat and pretended super hard to fall asleep. The entire flight, he did his best to try to annoy me, fighting me on the handrest, making it hard for me to move around, etc., but I never felt so good about my plane etiquette. Currently on an airplane and saw a man berate the flight attendant because they let employees of the airline board before the customers. He was so angry because he paid for business select. They didn't pay for crap, so why are they boarding before me? The flight attendant responded with its company policy, many are actually working and just need to get to the airport they'll be leaving from. And there's also only 3 on the flight, so what's the big deal anyway? He continued to whine and complain to her for another 10 minutes or so. All because now there were only 140 seats to choose from instead of 143. Boo-hoo. Have you ever come across an online post by someone else that was about you? What was it? My cousin posted about how his family makes fun of him for playing video games and collecting Legos since he's in his mid-20s. He has a job and buys his own stuff. He went on to say that 2 family members, without fail, poorly sneak through his room every Thanksgiving so they can buy him a Lego set he doesn't already have for Christmas. Apparently, my husband and I are not as smooth as we thought. I read a post on Reddit relationships where this person had gone on a first date with a guy and she thought he was a very nice and pleasant guy, but was boring and there was no chemistry, and she wanted advice on how to reject him for the second date. The details she described about the first date were exactly similar to a first date I'd had a week before the post. 2 days after the post went up and people responded with advice, I got a text from the girl I went on a date with saying she thought I was a nice person and she had a good time, but she doesn't think we'll be a good match and wished me all the best. So yeah, I came to know about my rejection before she could actually reject me. In all fairness, this was my first date ever and I probably was extremely boring and nervous, and I don't blame her at all for rejecting me. Someone made up a story about me stealing their husband and posted it on this kind of site. They stole a picture from my Facebook profile and posted it. To this day, I have no idea who did that. That person must have known me but didn't actually know where I live since it was posted with a town that is 6 hours away from where I actually live. I immediately told my husband about it and thankfully he didn't believe it, but somehow someone found it at work and everyone was talking about it. Even the VP called me to ask me about it. It was embarrassing. The post still lives and there's nothing I can do for them to take it down, but at least I got one to remove my picture. This gif of a kid playing soccer who takes 2 goal shots to the face, back to back. That's me. I have no idea who filmed it or posted it to the internet. I made a post asking for advice about one of our roommates not having a job and worried about how to pay for rent. We ended up talking to him and he got a job. Everything was cool. At the end of the conversation, he says, "And stop posting about me on Reddit," in a playful way. I found a post about my friend's band, and then I wondered who posted it. And I found very quickly it was my ex-girlfriend who was now dating the guitar player of said band. And so I had a click through her history and found a post about how I'd accidentally kneed her in her privates while we were doing the deed, and it made a funny noise. It felt pretty weird reading that. If you'll excuse the narrator, he has to go and check the entire internet to see if any of his many romantic fumbles have been aired for all to see. Divorced my ex because of addiction and mistreatment, culminating in a serious felony attack. A few years later, he started dating. I checked her out online and stumbled into a post she made on legal advice websites asking questions about my will. She was asking about the custody arrangements I've made for my kids in the event that their father isn't sober or healthy at the time of my death. I lost my mind when I read that. I'll admit that my phone call with my ex about this did not reflect me at my best. I once met a guy at a bar. We exchanged numbers and were going on a date before I googled him and found out that he and his mum were being charged with attacking a woman who was feeding stray cats. I told my coworker the story and showed her the insane surveillance video. She shared the story on a thread where Aziz Ansari was asking if people ever do research before their dates, and he included my story in his book Modern Romance. So that was pretty cool. In case you're wondering, no, I didn't go on the date. Also, this guy and his mum tried to convince the woman that they beat unconscious that she fell. She didn't even know that she was beaten until she saw the surveillance video. Oh man, I would have just gone on the date and waited until he asked, "What hobbies do you have?" to say, "I like feeding stray cats," just to see his reaction. Seems like his reaction might be violent if you did this.
Yeah, that seems like a great way to get beaten up by a guy and his mom, if you ask me.
Yep, my old roommate posted that I was stealing money from her and not paying my bills. Everyone on the thread was calling me a piece of crap and everything. What she forgot to put in the post was that she was a raging alcoholic. She never had money for the bills because she had spent it on booze. Everything was in my name because she still owed money on everything and they wouldn't turn things on in her name, even after she cleared her debt. She didn't talk about how she would be late for rent every month, but I was always on time. It got so bad that the landlord would call me to collect the rent. She is now in rehab and still trying to reconnect with me. I don't know if I can ever be her friend again after that. There's always more to the story, and I'm glad that I don't live with her anymore. When I was a freshman in university and Yik Yak was big. Classic. I had a knee brace on an injury that I wore every day. I'm also 5 foot tall and generally petite. Once I went to pick up a big package from the mail center and bring it back to my dorm. 1 block, so I knew I could do it and didn't ask for help. Someone wrote a yik-yak to the tiny girl with a knee brace and a giant box, hang in there. It kinda made my day. My mum even has a screenshot of it saved. I'm pretty sure about this. There was a story I read about a girl walking home late on a foggy night, seeing someone she thought was pretty odd walking towards her. As I remember, described angrily, and she explained debating crossing the street but continued forward. When they crossed paths, she said hello, and after a significant pause when they were already a few steps apart and she heard a faint little hey, which she also found odd. That guy was me. I was actually just very drunk, a little high and cold, walking briskly towards my house, which was a few miles away from the party I was at that evening. I remember seeing a silhouette of someone coming through the fog and getting a little scared myself, followed by relief that it was a woman, then instantly filled with the realization that my drunk butt is probably frightening the crap out of her, which led to panic to get the situation over with as quickly as possible. I even remember thinking at the time of responding to the story, but somehow the concept of, hey, I think I'm the guy that weirded you out, how neat is that? Didn't seem worth the neat to even weirder ratio. I've been in that situation so often. I'm a tall and wide-shouldered guy, and you can't see my baby face in the dark. Yes, someone posted one of my prom pictures pretending to be me. I saw it on the front page, as did my ex-boyfriend who featured in it, and was teed off that I'd posted it. To be fair, the pic is hilarious and totally front-page worthy. They must have been someone who we knew in real life because they linked to my ex's music site, mentioned what I'm doing now, detailed our relationship, among a few other things. They ended up deleting their account once it got big enough that people posted it on my Facebook wall and stuff. There can be only one. I was dating an alcoholic, and when he fell off the wagon, I spent a lot of time reading alcoholic subs to try and better understand how to help him. I found some posts he made talking about me and how to explain his disease to me, since I grew up with alcoholics and it deeply affected me. People kept telling him we wouldn't make it or that I must have really low self-esteem, but he said I was smart and cute and had a once-in-a-lifetime soul and wasn't the kind of person you gave up. I found it well after the fact, but my heart basically exploded. Felt like dressing up one day for school, red lipstick and all. I checked Yik Yak later, and someone had called out my exact outfit down to the shoes and said, why? That's 2 posts about Yik Yak and the narrator has no idea what the heck it is. Let me check Google real quick, and it's local Reddit? Huh, I thought the global reach for advice and commentary was kind of the point with Reddit. Feels like you'd be far more likely to get caught out on Yik Yak. I was judging for a writing competition and gave a poor score to one of the writers due to copious typos, grammar problems all over the place, and jarring narrative that seemed not to serve any purpose. She started stalking me and leaving nasty messages all over the forums, and then went over to Tumblr and here talking crap about how horrible I am. I basically blocked her and reported her behavior to the mods, but they didn't do much, so I just ignored her, and she eventually disappeared. A few months later, she left a comment on one of my stories telling me that she'd gone off her bipolar meds and apologized for her behavior. I didn't reply, but it looks like she's in a better place and getting help now. I think it's brave of her to apologize for that. It's not easy to revisit things you wish you hadn't done if you don't have to. Good on her for recognizing her situation and apologizing. And good on you for keeping your distance and wishing her well. A few years ago, before I met my wife, I answered a Craigslist ad from someone who needed a friend. I'm being very vague on purpose because I know she's online a lot. The day we met, I knew I wanted to date her. We spent a lot of time together for a few weeks, and then she was suddenly busy most of the time. A few days later, she called me to apologize, saying she kinda freaked out because I was getting too close and she wasn't ready for a relationship right now. I was devastated but backed away to respect her request. A few months go by and I met my wife. Fast forward 2 years and my very pregnant wife and I are shopping and we see the girl. She's very uncomfortable seeing us and my wife gave her a big hug, saying that I've only said the best things about her. My wife was actually a little jealous of the one that got away, but I'm proud that she was so gracious about it. We only spent a few minutes chatting, then she said she had to go and that was the last time I ever saw her. But a few weeks after that, I saw a Reddit post from a woman who claimed to have learned too late that she was in love. She mentioned a few specific things that made it super obvious it was her and that it was about me. That day was really rough and I was super teed off at her for a long time. I felt like she was acting out an Adele song by posting such specific information online, hoping I'd see it and go back to her, despite being married and about to have a child. Not totally rational, I know, but it was just frustrating to me. The silver lining is that I have a son I would never trade anything for and a wife that loves me most of the time, which is normal, I think. Today, I hope she's happy, but I would never go back to her and I have zero regrets. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. An unknown poster posted a picture of me from a concert tailgate. Apparently, I have the highest belly button ever. It was posited that I was raised by bats. I thought the whole thread was hilarious but never figured out who posted the picture. It was grabbed from a buddy's Facebook. A couple of months ago, I got a screenshot from a friend saying someone was posting awful things about me on their blog. I was never mentioned by name, but it referenced a lot of identifiers that made it plain to see it was me. Went to the blog and there were several entries that were just about why and how much she hates me, can't figure out why anyone would want to be around me, and a recurring theme that I'm copying her. What makes it a bit weird is that we've only met her once at a party, but there was such vitriol in the posts. I have to admit it does bug me. I'd love to say it rolls off my back, but the part of me that struggled in making friends and trusting people just feels so insecure when I'm reminded of it like that. I ran across an ex posting about how we met, and when someone commented, "You should marry him," she responded, "I plan to." It sent my heart exploding to think someone could even jokingly say something like that about me. Well, it was a joke because she dumped me for her ex a week later. I made it to the cringeworthy Reddit once. It was a picture of me being stupid in a mall for the sake of a joke that was posted on social media and eventually found its way to Reddit. Me and my friends had a good laugh many years later when we found out. Back when Yik Yak was popular and I was in college, there was a post stating, 123 Fake Street, apartment 23, needs to take care of their dog. I hear it crying every night. We had no dog, never quite figured that one out. I always thought it was my roommate who made weird noises while playing video games. My freshman year of college, I saw a yak that was like, the girl in philosophy class wearing the specific article of clothing is gorgeous or something like that, clearly talking about me. I didn't tell anyone because I'm pretty average looking, and I didn't know if people would believe me, but it made my entire week. Not on Reddit, but I matched with a girl on Bumble and I was in the background of her first picture. I was wearing a Gary Payton jersey and still had a man bun. Rest in peace to the hair. Aha! So you were able to whimsically say that you had already had a long and storied history together on your first date. Magnificent. I found myself in a picture once. I came across a post that showed a bunch of people on a plane returned from Afghanistan, and he was giving the finger or something and sent it to his mum. His mum replied with her doing the same thing with a bunch of co-workers. I was in the first picture. It was kind of crazy seeing myself on the front page and was fun guessing who posted the picture. It wasn't the actual person who sent it to his mum, but a different co-worker. An ex of mine has made a Reddit account for the sole purpose of crapping on me and my posts on Reddit. Honestly, I'm just flabbergasted a person I loved, was intimate with, and dated on and off for almost 7 years is nothing more than a Reddit troll now. It would be really funny if it weren't so sad. It was a photograph on Icon Has Cheeseburger of a cat next to a piece of string in the shape of a heart with the caption, "Now will you feed me?" Not only was it quite certainly my parents' very distinctive cat, it was the flooring and the skirting board of my parents' living room. Quite frankly, it creeped the F out of all of us as we hadn't taken the photo, none of our friends had taken the photo, and we owned no pink string. We ended up deciding for our peace of mind that the painters who did my parents' house last year must have taken it and posted it on the internet. After my loser ex and I broke up, I saw him post to Reddit saying that their roommate had moved out and changed the Netflix password on them, asking for advice on getting it back. It was my Netflix account, paid for exclusively by me, and I cancelled it within 20 minutes after leaving because they couldn't be bothered to tear their eyes from the TV as I packed up my things in tears. I was in the very worst days of my anorexia and depression and had dropped below 75 pounds. I'm a 5'8" male, by the way, and was going to the gym to ride on a stationary bicycle every day for about 40 miles. I was often either very high or on several 5-hour energy shots every morning I was there. I came across a post on this sub from someone who worked at the gym asking for advice about whether she should do something about the skeletal guy that comes in every day because he looks like he's dying. Some comments were really quite disgusting. People saying that I was probably just image-obsessed and insisting that anorexics are narcissistic and vain. Truth be told, I was just kind of waiting to pass away at that point and completely checked out of life, living on 100 to 500 calories a day. And when I found the post, I got in the car and impulsively drove down I-5 on a full tank of gas with no destination, just bawling. Then ran out of gas and slept in my car at a truck stop. Alright, I'm going to keep it vague, but I found a post on Reddit relationships by my ex when we were dating. I found the post about 4 months after he wrote it, and I was moving away at the time of the post, and we did eventually end up breaking it off. And the post was basically him saying he didn't want to lose me, but he felt like it was happening. Felt pretty crappy after finding it, lots of regret. Do people even talk to each other anymore? Half this post is people telling internet strangers things they'd be far better off saying to the other person. I was once alerted by a friend that a picture of me was posted on the old facial book rather than Reddit. It was on some lame page of D-bag gearheads and a picture of me filling my tires up at a gas station immediately after I picked my car up from a body shop unrepaired after a recent accident. Random guy who snapped the pic was making fun of me for totaling my car, when in all reality I avoided what could have been a far worse situation as an SUV T-boned my Miata. Luckily, I swerved in time to avoid a direct hit to my door with the SUV hitting my tire instead. Overall, I called the D-bag out on his ignorance and told him to stop creeping on chicks at gas stations and stick to tickling his pickle to cars instead. Overall, I felt weird as crap and creeped out that some guy was taking pictures of me unknowingly at a gas station, then posting them to the interwebs. Can't imagine the lives of celebrities stalked by paparazzi. Gross. A co-worker of mine must have forgotten that I was on her Facebook and went on a rant about me. We were goofing off at work and I made a comment that if I moved away and somehow ended up at that job again, that something had gone terribly wrong in my life. Little did I know that that's pretty much what happened to her. I was incredibly embarrassed and apologized profusely, but that still didn't stop her from slamming me on Facebook while all of her friends joined in. At least I got to defend myself. This was also the same person that dragged me for being unable to breastfeed my kids. If you really loved them, you'd blah blah blah. What a C-word. Sort of. I saw a post asking for ideas on a fairly narrow research paper assignment, because she needed to turn her term paper topic to her professor the next day. My husband was teaching a class on that exact topic, with that assignment due the next day. So I suggested something I knew he'd be really interested in. He came home the next day all excited that one of his students had picked that topic. Holy crap, you are the patron saint of undergrads. I need to start contacting my professors' wives. Let it be known that people should not start contacting their educators' families at home, just in case anyone was already searching the web for their details. A few years ago, I was browsing Reddit Forever Alone, and there was a post that said something like, "I have a date on Monday, so I guess I'll be seeing you guys on Tuesday," along with a bunch of crass jokes about his date and how he was planning on knocking her up. Didn't take me long to realize that this was the same guy I had a date with on Monday, so I commented about how I'd see him in a few days, at which point he texted my number to verify it was actually me. We laughed it off and I still went on a date with him. He was pretty fun and it went fairly well, other than his constant awkward jokes about how I was so perfect for him and how badly he wanted to get me pregnant. We hadn't even kissed and I was maybe 18 and he was in his mid to late 20s, so it was extra uncomfortable and I didn't know how to respond. We talked a little a while after and never actually ended up making plans for another date, partially because logistics and partially because his endless comments about impregnating me were really starting to weird me out. A few months later I ran into him commenting about our date and how it didn't go anywhere, but I was too young and immature for him anyways. I had this terrible roommate. He made me so uncomfortable that I mostly hid in my room. He crossed my boundaries, invaded my privacy, and was passive-aggressive. I finally gave my notice and started packing. He posted a cheesy questionnaire on Facebook and one of the questions was, "What are you most looking forward to?" He put, "My horrible roommate moving out." A bunch of people I don't know, who must have assumed his roommate couldn't see, started offering vague supportive comments like, "Oh yeah, bad roommates are the worst," or "Hope they leave soon." It bothered me most because first of all the only thing I ever did to him was not want to date him and put in my notice. But also the fact that our mutual friends could see it and so could I, which is just rude. I decided to comment and said, "I'm sure your supportive friends who don't know the situation at all are unaware that you're being this rude where I and our mutual friends can see it. You aren't a perfect roommate either, but at least I treat you with enough respect to not badmouth you so openly. If you're going to be purposefully cruel and try to humiliate me, I'll have to unfriend you so I don't have to see it." Shortly after posting, he deleted the whole thread. I used to be really active in the Reddit for indie makeup and more, and there were brand owners and some rabid fans there. Makeup reviews end up getting taken very personally. I get so many people trying to spread crazy rumors about me. Or maybe it was just the same crazy brand owner with 20 alts. People were saying I gave negative reviews for attention and would message new members negative reviews unsolicited just to destroy businesses. Who the heck has time for that? Your handmade lipstick grew mold. There's no grand conspiracy behind why your sales are failing. What is the best way someone has asked you out? A group of friends and I had gone to trivia at the campus bar, and after a few drinks and some great laughs, it was time to head home. There was a guy that I'd been hanging out with, but nothing too serious, so he walked me home, and as we got to his place, he stops and starts acting a bit odd. He finally says, "So, I've never really done this before, but, do you want to go out sometime?" Obviously, I was mostly excited and asked what he had in mind. His response was pure gold. "Oh, I don't know, I haven't thought that far ahead yet," and that was the end. I told him to tell me when and where, and that I would most definitely be there. We ended up going to a nice place in the downtown area and went for a long walk by the river. I can't really complain. I once got asked out on MySpace by some girl who said, "I'm friends with someone who used to babysit your younger brother." She had seen me in a metal club and asked her friend about me because he said he knew me. She stalked me for a while before sending that message. I found out later she was going to the club loads more often to see if I went. I was 16 and single, so I was totally up for it. Dated for a year or so, things were crazy as heck, and we broke up in a fit of rage, which resulted in her and her friend cornering me in her flat while they both screamed at me, and I grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it in her face, jumped out of the second-floor balcony of the building, and ran for the hills. I work at a little popcorn stand once a week. Every week, this cute, attractive, funny, witty man came in to buy popcorn and flirt with me. Every week, he left a lottery ticket in the tip jar with his phone number on it. One time, he got up the courage to say, "If you don't win this week, how about I take you out on a nice dinner to make up for it?" I thought it was very sweet, and we'd already had fun flirting and joking around. Too bad it turns out he was married. It's kind of sad that you have to inquire about these things before you accept a date. Just a note, he was not a midget or a clown or in his 80s. This is an interesting story, but that last tidbit of information's relevance is escaping me. Why is this an assumption that readers should be making? I'm obsessed now. Went to lunch with this guy at a local pub. We decided after lunch to walk around the neighborhood. I really had to pee, and we were outside this other restaurant I really like, so we went in. After a few drinks, he went to the bathroom and I paid for the drinks. He asked for the check when he got back, but the waiter just brought my receipt for him to sign. He said he's never had a girl buy his drinks, and what would his mother say to this? The restaurant gives a postcard with a tab, so I handed it over to him and told him to write her about it. He handed it back after writing, "Mum, this girl just bought my drinks. Not sure how to feel about this. Maybe I should take her to dinner this weekend." I thought it was cute, and I said yes. Well, a group of my friends decided to go out after work for some drinks, and he was going, so I asked him what time we were all meeting. He told me 5:30, so I arrived fashionably late at 5:45, only to find him at the table alone. I walked up and sat down, thinking everyone else was running late. We started chatting and quickly realized we have a lot of similarities, and I'm hooked. Around 7 p.m., everyone else starts arriving, and I'm curious as to why they were so late. They weren't. He told me an earlier time so he could spend some more time with me and get to know me. That night we kissed, and it has been sweet ever since. This story comes from a friend of my family. He was stuck in gridlock LA traffic on the Santa Monica freeway. Being close to losing his mind, he decided to roll down his window and start chatting with the woman in the car next to him. They hit it off, and he asked if she wanted to get off at the next exit and get some coffee. They've been married for about 8 years now. This thread is dangerous. It's actually giving me the courage to ask out a woman. I was at the student center in college on my laptop or something when this guy comes up to me and says, "You're the most gorgeous girl I've seen all day." I responded with something like, "Who put you up to this dare?" We talked for a bit and exchanged phone numbers, cause why not? He was really cocky and a year younger than me, but we hung out a lot cause he lived really close to me and I didn't have many friends. We became good friends, and I became good friends with his brothers and some other people he hung out with too. We didn't start dating until several years later when he was less annoying and less cocky. Now we're married and he's sitting really close to the TV playing Mass Effect shirtless. Score! My roommate was walking down the street the other day when a guy stared her straight in the eye and said, "Do you want to watch music television with me today?" She was taken aback but intrigued. That's a hard thing to say no to if done correctly. I was stuck in a really bad rush hour traffic on 95 when I heard a siren go off and a booming voice from a loudspeaker state, "Female in the gold Honda." I immediately started freaking out because I thought a cop was pulling me over with a loudspeaker and really had no idea what I could have possibly done. So I kind of feigned ignorance and hoped that it was all in my head. 10 seconds later I hear, "Beautiful female in the gold Honda." Wait, what? I turned around to see an ambulance about 2 cars back to the right of me, desperately trying to get my attention. The man driving the ambulance ended up asking me out over his loudspeaker. It was definitely the best way I've ever been asked out because it was so gosh darn random and hilarious. Sorry to disappoint, but after he asked me out, I had to politely decline because I was seeing someone at the time. His response was along the lines of, "It's okay, I'm not jealous." And just for clarification, it was a gold-colored Honda, not a solid gold Honda. I lived in another state and he wanted to visit me. I said, no, that's too much pressure, and what if I didn't like him? He'd have wasted all that money. His exact words were, "But what if it did work out? It'd be a hell of a story. We're married now. That is a hell of a story." He walked into a club and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Who wants to do the deed with Matumbo?" We were talking on Facebook chat and playing Would You Rather, and he said, "Would you rather have the best cup of coffee or go to the zoo?" I said coffee, and he replied, "How about next Friday?" I'd just come out of a lecture with a bunch of friends and we were standing around talking, probably trying to figure out what we were going to do later that night. I noticed this guy standing outside my lecture hall looking at me. I'd seen him around but never really paid any attention to him. We make eye contact for a split second, I probably furrow my brow a bit, and he purses his lips a little in thought. A minute later he comes up to me, still standing in with a group of maybe 5 or 6 girls, and says, "Hi, I'm Steven." He's pretty average looking, wouldn't stand out in a crowd. I introduce myself back. "Hi, I'm Jen." Without missing a beat he says, "I've seen you around and promised myself that if you ever acknowledged me that I'd talk to you. I think you're cute and I'd love to hang out sometime." It was so straightforward and I was so impressed with his confidence, though he later told me he was about to crap himself. I said, "Sure, let's exchange numbers." After we exchanged numbers, he chats for a bit, probably to make sure I'm not a huge butthole, says he has to get going but will be in touch soon. We dated for about 9 months, then realized we were better as friends. I know the manner in which he asked me out wasn't special or particularly interesting, but it sticks out to me because it was uncomplicated and to the point. There were no games. Almost 6 or 7 years later, we still keep in touch and hang out every so often. Not something you can say about most exes. The first text I got, "Now I have your number. Do you like Chinese food and a corn maze? We're married now." Accepting that date could have gone one of 2 ways, and I'm very glad it went the non-kidnappy way. A guy quit his job for me. My dad was his boss and I worked there too. He was old-fashioned and told my dad that he was planning on asking me out. My dad freaked and told him that if he plans on dating me, he needs to put in his 2 weeks, and if he forgets about it, he can continue working like nothing happened. He put in his 2 weeks the next day and we've been together ever since that. That was 10 years ago. We only knew each other in passing and never said more than a few words here and there. My personal favorite was the man who followed me for a block and announced, "Can I root you?" Obviously, I was thrilled, and by thrilled I mean I walked very quickly to my car. How rude. It's, "Can I root you, please?" In high school, my fiancé was being pressured by our other friends to ask me to prom, so in a rush he scribbled, "Prom?" on an empty, greasy pizza box that he'd found in the recycling. My reaction? A high-pitched, sustained, "Sure." 6 years and 1 child later, our friends still make fun of my response. He and I were talking about books and movies and TV shows, and he asked me what kind of food I liked. I told him that I love Cajun food, and he asked if I'd been to a local hole-in-the-wall Cajun place. When I told him I hadn't, he said, "We need to go. This Wednesday. My treat? Sound alright?" He and I are engaged now. He sent me a text along the lines of, "I had a good time talking to you when we met the other night. Do you want to go out for a drink sometime?" Upfront and straightforward is honestly way better than some over-the-top romantic gesture, at least for a first date. When you've been dating for a while, sure, get fancy. But most girls would rather know that A, you're interested, and B, what you want than have their apartments filled with flowers and be serenaded on the accordion. It's amazing how many people overcomplicate this. All that's needed is to be straightforward and ask them out. There's no need to make an overly convoluted proposal. If they're interested, they'll say yes. If they're not, they'll say no. A first date is a chance to get to know each other to see if there's anything worth continuing for both the guy and the girl. And the best scene to do this is usually by having drinks or coffee. This gives either party a chance to leave relatively easily if it's not working out, unlike a dinner where you get stuck together until the check comes, or a movie where there's no social interaction. It's real life, not a Hollywood romantic comedy. I told a girl I won a hula hooping contest years ago, and she said, "No way!" And I said, "Yeah, you're right, but I hear most relationships are based on lies, so I figured I'd get us off to a good start." I was buzzed and wasn't sure if I'd seen it somewhere before or made it up. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not that it's absolutely the best way any guy should ask a girl out, but it was endearing to me. We had been going on dates regularly for a couple of months. I don't think we'd ever actually talked on the phone, just texting and whatnot. One night I was out with some girlfriends and I got a text from him. "Hey, can you talk on the phone really quick?" "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" He called and I could immediately sense how nervous he was on the phone. He started off asking how my night was going and just generally leading some silly small talk. He told me he was a little drunk, and after a minute or so, "So, was there something you needed?" "Oh yeah, I wanted to know if you'd be my girlfriend." So cute. So nervous. I shamefully didn't tell him yes immediately. It wasn't for lack of interest, I'm not a confident person, and wanted to make sure he was absolutely positive he wanted me like that. But I was so flattered that he felt like he had to get a little tipsy in order to officially ask me out. Anyway, here we are, almost 2 years later, living together in an apartment. I'm about to make my first skydive with him, and I love him more and more each day. If you see this, I love you very much and I'm so happy you're mine. I once ordered a tall hot chocolate from a coffee shop. The guy behind the counter said, "Oh, so you want to order me?" Panties hit the floor. I'm imagining the Old Spice guy. Well, nobody ever orders a pale, pasty white guy. They should really pull that off the menu. I once asked a girl out through a Super Bowl bet, and I won. Thank you, Seahawks. By saying yes when I asked him out myself. Thank you. I have been keeping an eye out for stories where the girl asks the guy out, but this story's prompt was, "What's the best way a guy has asked you out?" So understandably things have been a little one-sided. My current boyfriend and I had the most awkward and casual courtship ever, and it became official with a conversation that went exactly like this. "So I've kind of been telling people you're my girlfriend." "Okay. Does that make you my girlfriend?" "I guess so." Similar to what a lot of people are saying regarding honesty and being straightforward, my current boyfriend asked me out by saying, verbatim, "Well, I told a girl at work you were my girlfriend, so what do you say? Be my girlfriend. Do it." It's important to note that by this point we'd been seeing each other for a bit and had developed an understanding of the other's humor, so it was actually the perfect approach. I work at Starbucks and he came through the drive-thru. He got a dirty chai and paid with cash, but he asked if he could have his receipt. I thought it was a little weird that he'd wanted a receipt because he paid in cash. But before I could hand it to him, he said, "And in case I have any questions, would you write your number down?" I was shocked and flattered, so I did. That was almost 3 years ago, and we've been inseparable ever since. On a scale of 1 to America, how free are you tonight? That got me.
I'm Guantanamo.
When I was a server, I had a handsome gentleman ask me a couple of questions about the specials, and then he replied to say, "So I can have anything I want on this menu?" "Of course you can," I replied. He dropped the menu flat to the floor and said, "Would you stand on this for me?" I was flattered, it was witty and made me blush, but I'm gay, so he ended up having the beef dip. We had just done the deed, he was wasted, he flopped on top of me and said, "Date me." He then passed out and didn't remember the next day. We're now happily married and I hope he reads this.
So, doing the deed comes before the date. Gotcha. I'm glad I'm taking my notes.
I've had pretty good results with, "Want to meet for coffee?" It's low pressure and low risk. If you're weird, it's a public place and they can just leave any time since you've met them there. You can make it 20 minutes or if it goes well, make plans to meet that night. The other perk is you can see if she shares your coffee addiction. If you don't drink coffee, you can get the F out of my face. I once did an imaginary fishing pole cast towards a girl in a group at a bar. It somehow worked and she did a few flops to get over to me. Her reaction was perfect and I've never tried that trick again. My favorite one was pure chance and confidence. On my way back home from London, I travelled through Leicester Square tube station. I play a game called Keep Up Commuter. I race against commuters determined to get through the crowds. I'm jogging with this cute banker guy next to me, then suddenly this old Italian guy clocks me. Bollocks. He started offering me his pizza, which he insists is genuine and real Italian. In his defense, he was holding an actual pizza, but I refused and insisted I was full already. Cute banker guy had noticed all of this and glared as I refused. So when we go to part ways to go north as the Italian goes south, cute banker guy gets up the courage to ask, "Can I get some pizza if she doesn't?" He stares him down and shouts, "You are no a pretty lady." The classic awkward hilarity this erupted in me was unreal, laughing at this banker as he stands there flustered. We got to talking and have known each other for about 9 months now. It was all down to pure luck and I enjoyed the fun of it all. Guys, go for it. I don't know if this really counts, but whatever. When I was in the 10th grade, a classmate of mine was hit by a car and his arm was severed above the elbow. They were able to reattach it, but he lost a lot of mobility. Fast forward to senior year, I'm house sitting for my uncle and this kid lives across the street. He comes over, we smoke and chat a while, and then all of a sudden he uses his functioning arm to lift up his other, mostly dead arm and place it gently around my shoulder. I was speechless. I think we made out or something, but I can't remember anymore. He came up to me, stuck his hand out and said, "Hi, my name is… name. What's your name?" I said my name, he misunderstood and we joked about that. I'd say it worked pretty well because 10 years later we're married and I'm currently serving as an incubator for another one of his offspring. Wonderful that such a cute and bumbling pickup could lead to this distinctly clinical-sounding relationship. I hope you and your donor live a long, fulfilling life. I was driving around town after work, windows down. It was a gorgeous October day. I noticed 2 guys in a car next to me, one in civilian clothes, the other with his ABU's, Air Force, uniform. I thought it was adorable that they were together because Don't Ask, Don't Tell had just been repealed. I kept driving. A friend prank called me and asked if I had any rubbers, so I was laughing. We hung up and I was singing along to a Christina Aguilera song, I Hate Boys. I stopped at an intersection and glanced in my rear view and saw a guy running full tilt toward my car. I was so shocked that I didn't think to lock my doors or anything. He got to my car, threw a slip of paper in and ran off. It happened so fast I didn't even really see him. The slip of paper was a receipt from some dinosaur park in Texas and on the back was scribbled a phone number, all bumpy from being written on a car dashboard in a rush. I'm pretty sure I sat in my car with my mouth agape for like 5 minutes. I nearly missed the light when it turned green. I watched as the guy drove past me. It was the man in civilian clothes that I thought was gay. I went home and tried to work up the courage to call him, but I chickened out and texted him instead. I said, "Is this the crazy effer that threw his phone number into my car?" And he replied, "Is this the crazy girl who's texting me back?" We were inseparable after that. We've been married for 2 years now. I'd stayed over at his house. We were best friends, and in the morning he said, "Let's go to Liverpool." We ran to the train station, got on the first train there, went to the Tate and laughed at all the crap art. I swear it was like some cliché indie film. Then we went to a top restaurant, laughed at all his cheesy jokes, then we had coffee on the way back on the train. When we got back to his, he told me he wanted me to be his girlfriend. We'd already been cuddling and holding hands all day and it was lovely. We went to bed and cuddled all night, revealing our mutual feelings. Totally natural progression from friends to partners. Hope that gives you some ideas. The landlord in Spider-Man 3 method is the most direct. Just tell her, "I am man, you are woman." I have a very, very warped sense of humor. I had a guy come up to me, lean in really close, take a deep breath, and then he says, "Oh my god, you smell so good. Kind of like a whore." I didn't see that line coming. I ended up being with him for 2 years. He said, "Climb in the car." So I did. He then drove with me for an hour until we reached a very small, spooky village. Then he parked the car in the middle of what seemed to be a wood. It was then that I started to freak out a bit. I mean, I'm courageous, but this made me question if I was being murdered. He climbed out of his car and I followed with some hesitation. Then we were in front of a huge fence. It was slightly bent on top, so he managed to get over the fence rather easily. I got stuck on my jeans and tore them open for a bit, landing with a thump on the grass. Holding out a tiny flashlight, he led me up a steep mountain covered with rocks. All the while, I'm like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Then I looked up and the moonlight revealed an old castle ruin. Both my eyebrows raise. There, on top of the tower, we stand and talk, enjoying the stars and the noises of the animals in the woods. It's not too cold, and how cool's that to raid a castle in the middle of the night? I was thrilled. In middle school, a boy asked me if I had a boyfriend. I said no, so he asked if I wanted one, and thus, true love was born. In first grade, a boy came up to me and said, "Do you like me? Your friend said you liked me." And I yelled, "No," and ran away. I did like him.
What might have been?
By asking me out on a date, not to hang out, chill, grab drinks, etc. Actually, hey, I'd love to take you out to dinner and get to know you. Sitting across from you at dinner, discussing food on the menu, having constant conversation, not interrupted by TV or a movie. I'm worth it and you are too. As a follow-up to that, asking me out again at the end of the night will generally garner a yes. The whole 3-day thing is complete and utter bullcrap. You know what's sexy? A guy who likes me and isn't afraid to let me know he does. I never ever said yes to a guy who would wait several days to contact me again after a date. If he was genuinely interested, he would let me know. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.